I don't know if you guys have heard me talk about like how I think this is gonna go, because a few of you guys have done like other class tree discussions. Actually, I think only Growl has, but like I think a few of you have listened to them. But Evoker's like very, very different, right? Because it's kind of hard to separate the class tree from the actual class because you're just getting both at the same time. So I think class tree needs to be a discussion, and the choices you make, we'll go through them just like we normally do. But I think before we do that, we kind of need to talk about the class as a healer in general before we get into the actual talents and talk about decision making, including, and you can reference certain spells they have, their power level and stuff like that, and then obviously balancing like how they're currently tuned versus like, you know, assuming everything is tuned to a normal level, what the class actually looks like and stuff like that. But I do have to put your all's names on my stream real quick. The idea is kind of moving through the tree, making decisions as we go, talk about the other ones that could be a thing. Every time you reach a stopping point of things that are like basically required, you then like kind of go through and talk about the options based on like niche situations of what you would select. And then you can also change them based on builds. Like usually we start like for DPS, for example, like pure single target. For healers, it's usually we do raid and then dungeons. And then after you're done with raid for a healer, for example, you would like modify it to be like, oh, but if you're doing a mythic plus, here are the decisions you make. And then really important things to point out are nodes that feel really bad to select because the thing after it doesn't make sense. Like having to go through something that's dog shit to get something that doesn't apply to it at all. Like in the DPS sense, it would be getting a like having to click multi-shot to get aimed shot or something like that. Just making that up, like that would be bad. That exists sometimes.
Plenty of those.
Yeah. So you definitely want to point those out because we've like those have been getting fixed pretty fast. Okay, so we are going to be doing these on Wowhead, assuming level 70. Don't really care about like questing stuff. I'm going to completely reset it. I've actually never looked at these talent trees myself for preservation at all. I think Growl like talked about a few buttons they had, and I like hovered over it on the first day, but I haven't really looked at it. But before we get into the talent trees, there's a lot of topics about evokers in general. So obviously they have some mediocre but also very powerful raid buffs and raid utility. I don't really know a lot about their healing cooldowns, and obviously they are a 25-yard range healer, which has bosses where that is kind of not as big of a deal and it wouldn't really matter, but also bosses where you would need to support them with other healers. I think there's a big conversation of the whole mid-range thing might just need to be, you know, a DPS only thing. Like, you know, it's just kind of weird to have healers not heal with 40 yards. So I guess let's just start there. How do you guys feel? You haven't done a ton of content with it. I know Growl did a Mythic Plus with me, but Mythic Plus, you're much more grouped usually. How do you guys think that will actually feel in a raid?
So one of like the woes I have right now is like the mobility options are great to deal with that, and kind of to an extent, I guess. I guess the one big thing is like the main spell that you would use to like move between groups of people on a lowish cooldown is rescue, but that's tied to like a lot of later stuff, like a lot of talents and a lot of healing things, which I think is important to be separated out, because if you want to have a 25-yard range as a healer, rescue is currently like the only thing you can really do to move between, like, let's say there's a melee stack and a range stack. You kind of need like to be able to jump between them to heal them separately.
Okay. Shit, real quick, I need to turn my voice activation on because I just realized I'm going to type a bunch of Z's on Wowhead. Yeah. Okay, so that's good, but also I think something that's kind of weird right now, and this is a little bit of a tuning thing, so not super important, but how do you guys feel about how powerful rescue is as an actual heal? Because I think that's definitely something to think about where, you know, this ability, and it's kind of cool. I actually think it's really cool that it heals for a DPS player, for example, because like I think it like rescue, the whole word rescue, right? Like yes, you're like basically life gripping you to them, or it's not to their exact pixel, it's like next to them, I think, but they get a fat heal, so like a really giga-brained like range DPS in your guild could like save someone with rescue, like, and that makes sense. But how do you feel as a healer that you have a powerful healing spell tied to one of your main movement abilities?
I think it's there's a talent, right? Bottom middle of the tree of preservation that pretty much makes you want to press it off cooldown. So things can be like required to press off cooldown once you get the use of the class. Call of
I see
Ysera.
that. The Call of Ysera, yeah. Okay, well that's like kind of even buys into what I'm saying though, because there are a few DPS classes in this game at least that have movement skills tied to throughput. I think didn't Mistweaver used to have this a long time ago, the same way Windwalker did, where you use Chi Torpedo for healing, just like you did for damage, right? So it's like kind of a similar concept where I don't know how the healing community feels about having spells that are primarily for utility, you know, that you basically have to use off cooldown for throughput.
I think it's fine to an extent as long as you have farther range, because like I was saying earlier, like right now rescue is like your main way of like moving long distances or long-ish distances. So like needing to use that as a heal while also needing to use it to move is bad. But if you just had longer range, then I think it'd be okay to have the heal.
Also, it's like one of like your only really instant cast spells you have. Like pretty much everything else is like you have to channel it or cast it, and it's kind of cringe, but I don't know, something to get used to. It's definitely a different playstyle than the other healers that we are able to play.
That's almost certainly what they would be going for too. Because like I mean, if you're committing to a 25-yard range healer, it would be okay that you take the drawback of that and being a very cast heavy class, which also has its drawbacks, but you would just reward that with power level. I just think that sometimes with the healer meta in the past, when they've kind of pushed you into that line of thinking where you have to like deal with some stuff, but you get some like crazy power out of it, that's usually exploited, and like those things are just too good. Like for example, if like stacked healing is super insane, but they try to make fights that make you not stack as much, so it's like not as good, but you would just find a way to stack. You just will find a way to make use of something that's crazy. You would just make yourself stay within 25 yards of an evoker if evokers are that good to compensate for it, right? So I guess more of it would be like, how do you guys see them fitting into a raid comp right now? Not really based off of tuning, as much as just how they heal differently than other healers. What healers do they heal like? What healers are they totally different from? Would they be a nice pairing with, you know, are they a good healer to bring along with just like mass throughput raid wide healing, or are they like kind of a niche healer?
So it depends kind of on what build ends up. Like there's a few different like variants of like how evokers deliver healing, whether it's burst windows, somewhat similar to like a disc shaman hybrid, or consistent throughput, more like a mistweaver shaman hybrid. I, maybe it's just me, but I think a lot of this feels very shaman-y in terms of like there's a lot of initial healing and then there's a small bit of healing over time. Whereas like Mistweaver is a lot of healing over time and Disc is like super bursty. But I don't think it exactly fits like the exact same healing profile that a Shaman has, but it's very similar to like a hybridization between Shaman Mistweaver or Shaman Disc. It like fits in between those classes, depending on what side of the healer talent, like the actual spec specific talent tree you fall into.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot like Shaman too, in the way that, number one, it feels like some fights it could be really good, some fights it's bad because its utility is so specific. Like, you know, it's APT and Spirit Link are like insane for certain situations. And there's other times where if it was like a fight you had to spread, like I just try and imagine playing this class on like Fetid Devourer or something. It just would literally do absolutely nothing with 25-yard range. And also it's sort of the play style of you just have like these pretty good buttons that you're mostly just like pressing them when they light up, sort of like how Shaman just like presses Wellspring, presses Unleash Life. You just like have these like efficient buttons that you're just kind of sending off CD.
Yeah.
There's currently a playstyle that you could play truly mid-range where like you're not required to be in a stack point of like being melee or ranged, but like let's say, you know, something like Sludge Fist where like you would be in between the melee and range, where like ranged one to be really far away, melee obviously have to be on the boss. You would be in between, and you'd still be able to heal everyone pretty easily, and that's like the disc-ish style of gameplay loop that it has available to it currently, which might be a bugged interaction, might not be. We'll have to see how they feel about it, but it essentially just kind of ramps similarly to a disc priest and has like a chain heal kind of healing delivery system for that healing.
Yeah, I also think that, like, on Growl's point as well, about like how on Fetid Devourer they would be basically worthless. There's been a lot of cases actually on fights where healers don't have to all like kind of do the same thing. Like, for example, if they had a bunch of really powerful, like close group or small target healing, like that's stuff that's happened in the past. Like look at P2 of Jailer, for example, right? Like most groups had, like their Holy Priest, like kind of spot healing the middle group. They had their Disc Priest ramping during like big sets of AoE damage. And then they had like a Resto Druid or a Holy Priest just watching one side of the line people. And then like, at least for our guild, Driney was rule of law, like beaconing the other side. So you have like kind of mini assignments like that at all times where, and this is actually commonly done by paladins now, where like paladins do a ton of like focused melee healing and tank healing over the whole fight, and they're like kind of obviously near the boss, even though they have a longer range than evokers do. But like you kind of separate that stuff out to where like a lot of the hot healers or ramp healers are focusing more on ranged on some encounters, to where if something is powerful enough at a niche, it can kind of just do that alone, to where like on Fetid, for example, it could just sit around the boss and mainly focus on melee, and it could still be potentially powerful if other healers were focusing on other things.
Yeah, this healer I would not want to play in Jailer P2. The rest of Jailer,
Yeah, I think in P2 is
interesting.
P2
Why is that?
Like in Jailer P2, you know how like you're already really spread, and you have like one healer that watches the right people, one healer that watches the left people, because 40-yard range can't even cover that, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine you're restricted to basically half that. Like you're in living hell. You have to move like so far to be able to spot heal the people who need critical healing due to their assignment in the fight, which is the only hard part about that phase was healing bloods necessarily. So needing to have such extreme movement to get to those spots while also needing movement to deal with the mechanics on the fight, I think Evoker would completely just faceplant in that phase. You'd need to be hard carried, but I think you could do a lot better than like what a shaman or like a Mistweaver would bring in like phase 1, 3, and 4 of Jailer. So it's, I think, really, really good at stacked healing, but when you need to be ultra spread, it completely fails.
So
yeah, I definitely don't see it as like a single target like spot healer. Like I sort of see it in a way like Paladin is, where you have like this group of melee. Like I almost sort of see it as a melee healer. The only thing I wanted to add too about rescue is that, so when you talk about this idea, right, of it's 25 yards, so you can kind of sit in between melee and range, using rescue a lot sort of throws that out the window, right? And that's one of the big downsides of rescue, is that if you try and have that play style where you're in the middle, as soon as you rescue to anybody, you're literally out of range of half of them, Like you can't necessarily just plant, I think, in the middle in the way that people think you can.
Yeah, basically what I was saying for like the middle playthrough is basically you wouldn't use rescue at all for actual healing throughput. There's ways around it right now, which again might be bugged interactions, and we can touch on that once we actually start exploring talents, because it all depends on the talents that you take to do that kind of healing.
Okay. Also, just before we get into the tree as well, just about like general class things. So they do bring a source. Let's just talk about their raid buffs or raid utility very briefly. So that would be their actual 1 hour raid buff, Zephyr, Time Spiral, and Source of Magic. I'm not talking about their healer raid cooldown. We'll get into that into the spec tree, but just talking about like kind of the Evoker class in general. Have you guys seen so far what the power level of specifically Source of Magic is?
We've done a little bit of testing on it, and I think after playing around with talents, like we did testing on it very, very early. I haven't like retested it, but basically the way it would math out is with one of the playstyles right now, you're casting 2 empowered abilities roughly every 15 seconds at level 4 empowerment. So you're casting a total of 8 empowerments every 15 seconds, which ends up being 4% mana to a co-healer every 15 seconds. And then you're also casting Fire Breath once every 30 seconds for another 2% mana to that co-healer. So it ends up just being a ridiculous amount of mana that you give back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
like if you have one of these as a healer.
Empowered spells? Oh, that is
so
many.
Oh yeah, you are using a ton of empowered spells in raid.
And that's definitely going to bring
now.
us to another thing too. And we'll kind of talk about empower spells after this, but I kind of wanted to talk about a few other things about that before we like move on from Source of Magic. But Source of Magic, like extremely powerful. Definitely depends on tuning, but something where you could potentially bring a few evokers, because just the single power that this brings to a actual singular healer is like really insane.
Yeah.
Good.
Although, as a healer, I think you get a lot more benefit out of Source of Magic, like in terms of the mana that you donate to another healer, than what a DPS Evoker would give to a healer. Based on what I understand of DPS Evokers, they can probably touch on that more later, but I think healers use a lot more empowered spells in their rotation than DPS do.
Yeah, oh, definitely. The other thing is, let's talk about the 2 speed ones before Zephyr. So they have a 1 hour duration, just a regular raid buff that gives a 15% CDR to every class's major movement skill. I actually have a list of those just to give you an idea of what that looks like. I'll actually probably put it. I'm going to share my screen because we're going to be going through the talent trees together in a second. Here it is. So it gives Paladins 15% reduction on Horse, DH Fell Rush, Druid Dash, Mage Blink, Monk Roll, Priest Leap of Faith, which actually, it's funny that like priests have to talent into their movement, but they, I think actually getting a free use of Leap of Faith specifically with Time Spiral is actually in some cases probably a lot higher value than a lot of these things, just being at a longer cooldown and a kind of a unique ability. Sprint, again, Shaman's getting Spirit Walker's Grace from this is like very powerful, probably much more powerful throughput wise than a lot of these would be. Warlock Personal Port, pretty irrelevant. DK Death's Advance, depends on the situation. Evoker Hover is probably, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I don't know how it works for healers, but like just looking at the DPS version of this class, Hover is maybe the best movement ability in the game. The only thing that I can kind of think of that's really any better is Shimmer, or as good. And then Heroic Leap is terrible, and then Aspect of the Cheetah would be like a very good use of this. But like, it's about like half the classes in the game that really get any real good benefit from having it being a 15% reduction, especially the like lower cooldown stuff, because the longer cooldown stuff is just going to depend on the fight, right? Like having exactly your 1 or 2 minute movement thing be up a little bit faster is like maybe fight specific, but not like something you need them to have in your raid. But I think Time Spiral does present some, and it's really easy to get on the tree, presents some really cool uses that you could use all of this for.
Yeah, like a fight like Sylvanas, Time Spiral would be pretty nuts, like going across to the next bridge.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, I mean it's like it's kind of functionally a roar, but not really. It's on the same cooldown or the same old cooldown as roar, but it like also has some other increased abilities. But I actually think the raid buff, I think Time Spiral is much better than the raid buff. I think the raid buff is just not very strong. And then the last thing would be Zephyr. This is actually what I consider their raid cooldown. Like a take I had kind of recently was that I feel like none of like this feels like roar. Their raid buff actually feels kind of irrelevant for most content. But Zephyr is something that is basically their raid buff. You could reword this to say, and we talked about this yesterday, it's party based and it does reduce the damage of everyone of the damage they take from area effect attacks in your party. But what it really could say, and this is how you'd set your groups up, is it makes your 4 other weakest players in your entire raid, have a reduction ability every 2 minutes, which is typically as many as you actually have. Things like healer priests, hunters, non-fire specs of mage, where you could have those in one party, and just having a singular evoker just buff those people, which is sometimes the only people you're actually using a damage reduction for, is insane in raid, and like just such a, especially at that cooldown, it's just so powerful.
I kind of see this also as like sort of like a defensive for the evoker themselves, and also it's somewhat a healing increase for preservation due to mastery interactions, where your mastery currently reads, while you have more % health than your target, you do mastery % more healing. So having Zephyr be restricted to just your party means that for 3/4 of the raid, if you all get hit for the same numeric value and you all have roughly the same amount of numeric health, the rest of the raid would be knocked lower percentage-wise, which means you would get a throughput increase out of using Zephyr to preserve your own health.
Okay.
To then boost everyone else's health back up.
That's kind of interesting. Yeah.
But also the class doesn't really have any other defenses besides the one at the very, very top, so it's like you're kind of hard-pressed into taking this anyway.
That's actually our next topic before the last thing we do before going into the trees, is talking about their personal cooldown. And I also think in a lot of practical scenarios, Fly With Me on a 1 minute cooldown with Twin Guardian will be used as a personal. On classes or on fights where you don't need it as movement, going very little duration is basically like a 1 GCD, 30% health absorb for you and another person. I think that's extremely powerful. and kind of needed with how weak, very weak. I think when I first saw this, it seemed a lot better than it is. And I think Obsidian Scales will potentially be good against like big physical hits that don't ignore armor, but a lot of physical hits in raid do ignore armor, and a 1.5 minute with 2 extra talent points invested just to get a 20% magic damage reduction is very, very weak. But the class has so much utility that you could almost argue it that it makes sense.
Yeah, I don't really get the personal. Like, to me, it doesn't. It's just like not very good. Like, it's okay, but I don't really understand why they did it that way.
I'm thinking it's because there was a lot of like, you know, like the Black Dragonflight is something that is not really shown a lot with Evoker, since there isn't like the tank spec or whatever. I think this was like their way. The reason it seems much more tank related is they wanted it to be like, that's why the armor thing is there, I think. But yeah, it definitely seems a little out of place.
I think in practice, if they want like the armor thing to be something like a 40% phys damage reduction, and the rest, like the other part, to be a 20% magic damage reduction, I'd much rather them just have like a 30 or 40% phys damage reduction taken off the top of it, just because armor usually doesn't work on raid mechanics.
Yeah.
So like, it's cool flavor, I guess. Be like you're hardening your scales, but yeah.
If you look beyond that talent though, like if you count all the other talents and like renewing blaze at the bottom, Zephyr, Twin Guardian, then if you go in preservation, what's it called, below Emerald Communion, you can spec it into flow state, which is at 20% health increase. Like you technically have 5 different personals. They're not like great, but you have a lot of like different options for.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a good point.
Something.
Renewing Blaze or whatever, that's going to be really good for a lot of stuff in raid. I feel like it's a.
Oh, renewing Blaze is cracked. Yeah, renewing.
That's going to be. I kind of forgot about that when I was talking about raid.
Like, there's a lot
of that's going to be really solid.
There's a lot of dungeon. Yeah, we were going to talk about this next. There's a lot of dungeon things for this too. Like, just imagine like a Pride comes out in season 1 of this expansion, right? You would just pop this every time, and you wouldn't even need to be looked at, right? Like there's a ton of things, and this obviously like bosses will have mechanics where this is just really powerful.
Well, you need to be looked at like a tiny bit, right? Because like it heals over 14 seconds, but the damage you're taking is compressed into 8 seconds, so you're taking a slight bit more damage than what you're healing back. Or am I just not understanding that properly?
Well, I mean, so even if, let's just say at the end of that, even if you started healing instantly and it was scaled for the damage you took over the entire 8 seconds, let's just say you were at 100% and you took 99% of your health over 8 seconds. What like health do you think right now you would, and you took it evenly, what health do you think you would be at the end of that 8 seconds? Then obviously healing for 6 seconds
you'd
after
be at
that.
Something like 60 or
you'd be like 50 or
like,
it'd be really good, right? It's definitely a very powerful ability. Like this is a better cooldown than most classes personal. Like imagine comparing this to like Exil. Like hunters have Exil. This is just way better than Exil.
Yeah, it's cracked against, I think, damage over time, but obviously bad against burst. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now. Do you guys have any other general thoughts on the class before we now keep in mind when we do the talent tree, we're going to be talking about a lot of these buttons as we select them because a lot of them are niche picks based on the type of content we're doing. We are going to start with raid healing, and we are only talking about the class tree. So any one of you guys can take me down the class tree in any spot you want, and we will talk about when we get to points before going on. I will sometimes stop you and ask about where a lot of these points can go into based on the certain content, because I think you have a little flexibility.
Yeah, so you're going to start with Rescue, and you're immediately going to go to the right to Scarlet Adaptation, because that's broken as fuck.
Let's actually talk about Scarlet Adaptation for a bit. So something that they did with a few healers, it seems with a lot of talents, these trees haven't been released yet, but it seems like they're, for the priest ones that already have been released, and the new ones that have had like some data mined spells, it seems like they're putting a focus on making sure that the healers right now that don't do damage while healing are getting some damage attention in these trees. So Holy Priest got a lot of that. Holy Priest has like a pretty high potential damage profile. And this is basically just reads, this talent exists, and they thought of this because they want, whenever you're actually able to Living Flame for damage, they want it to be a much bigger hit based on how much you've healed recently, which is really efficient in a raid setting for sure. So this is a brilliant talent, yeah.
As of right now, you can cap it about once every 15 seconds with a playstyle, which is like the chain heal-ish playstyle, like the disc chain heal kind of playstyle. So it's going to be a lot of damage if, tuning is right and things like that. Obviously, it's capped, so you need to use it frequently. but
But that's
essentially
fine.
just
It's kind of similar to
insane.
Shaman and like
Yeah.
putting up Flame Shock, for example. It's like the GCD you have to use somewhat frequently, but it's like just way too worth it for the value. And I assume there's no other way your class really naturally does like single target damage other than this talent, correct?
Fire Breath has a lot of synergies in the healing side of the tree that you're
Okay.
going to be pressing Fire Breath on cooldown. So
Excellent.
pretty much you cast Fire Breath like, I guess Holy Fire or Flame Shock or whatever you want to compare it to. Cast that on cooldown, just get the damage out. It also provides a little bit of healing, but then Scarlet Adaptation is like your big like, I want to focus on damage for a little bit kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Take me past this.
You take the left side, which is the extra living flame,
Mm-hmm.
and then here you're just going down the healer path. Cauterizing Flame's
So
insane.
let's talk about this real quick, though. So I think it's okay that healers always pick this, and then when we talk about the DPS tree later, this is definitely something that is an interesting choice, but not always good for a DPS evoker. For example, they might take it in dungeons, probably every single dungeon, but in a raid, this is very fight specific, right? Because it doesn't actually do the massive heal effect unless it actually does remove a button, right? And it's also a global. But are you okay with healers basically always selecting this and it really not being a choice, even though it kind of can be teched out in some situations where you don't get that point back?
Yeah, so the only reason why you take it right now is just the
Temple
point
of
after it, which is just it ends up being 4% healing done increase,
Yeah.
which is okay. But I mean, in theory, the talent below that one, which is the Emerald Blossom, heals 2 additional allies. That one isn't mandatory in one of the builds, so it's like essentially you're only taking Cauterizing Flame or whatever it's called to take the 4% healing increase. So it could feel bad in scenarios where you don't need the dispel.
Okay. So just something I would want to point out on this tree, and this is stuff we've had looked at by devs in other class discussions, is like the things that they've chosen to be tangents on the class tree. CC, kind of CC because it has an interaction with kick. Healer, you would almost certainly never take this, but like DPS on a 20-second kick, which they have access to, this could be good on a kick fight. And then this one is just a direct 2 points away tangent to make this CC node better. So you guys are basically saying, well, you're just always going to take Cauterizing Flame because healing received is right under it. I just don't know if that...
see Scarlet Adaptation and Cauterizing Flame swapped in places.
You would like to see which ones? Scarlet Adaptation and Cauterizing Flame?
Mandatory Scarlet Adaptation, just because like it also kind of presses on like the healer should be doing damage, which you should be in like reality.
Yeah, that's
So
a whole
it-
other discussion of why people
but
don't
yeah.
do that. But yeah.
Yeah, I actually disagree. I think we're talking about at a high level here and maybe even like a mid to high level, but I would say there's probably a lot of guys out there that play raid that don't care at all about doing damage, even though they maybe should. And I think that putting that Cauterizing Flame there is fine because number one, you kind of want to encourage people to take that because it's like a good utility button. And number
turned him
two,
down a
like
little
keep in
chat. I
mind
turned him
we're
down.
on with the healer side and we're in the first very like beginning of the tree, you know. Like I think there's already some really good decisions about what you want to do with your points here compared to some of the other trees. So I'm not necessarily like trying to increase the complexity of what we have here because there's a lot of other stuff on the left too that you probably wouldn't take and raid at all, but is like interesting to think about stuff like essence regeneration and like CCs and do you want to take the improved wall and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think having it as a mandatory is probably fine. Like I get the idea that there's going to be some raid fights where you don't use that and it's not that great of a button, but I mean that's sort of the case like across the board on like all the trees that there's some of those spells and whatever.
Well, and also just to be clear, I think in raid, just knowing raid fights, Cauterizing Flame would be used on like 90% of raid fights. It's actually like extremely like
Right.
the fact that you wouldn't have this button used is pretty insane. So
Has
Yeah,
Well,
being
it's
able to
Giga
dispel
mana
bleed now
efficient.
is kind of crazy.
It's giga mana efficient. Like that's the big part of it is like you want to snipe just even if you don't even care about removing the thing, you want to get that because it does a big heal with costing virtually 0 mana.
yeah, no, it's definitely extremely powerful. We're not going to go into like that whole conversation. We've actually had that on stream, Growl and I, at some point about just the whole like why people trying to get to the top level of rating healing don't like do damage because they're trying to climb the shit. We're not going to do that right now. But yeah, I guess that's a good point that not a lot of people heal like that. So I mean, this is like a minor nitpick that just something to consider that maybe Cauterizing Flame could be a choice, but it's fine the way it is right now. Where are you guys grabbing the next 3 points to move down?
So you're going to actually spend 4 points here. You're grabbing the personal, the one below it, and then the essence regen to the bottom left.
Okay, that's fine. instead of grabbing the 2 essence regen, I'm just gonna grab the 1 for now, because
Well,
the way
you
we're
pretty
gonna
much need to take both.
Okay.
Essence is a huge part about healing, and like it feels weird that like
Yeah, no, I understand
you're
that.
meeting the next break point, but
The way these become really interesting is you basically take the total amount of, because the level, if these trees are done correctly, the power level of a lot of things actually should be like more towards the bottom of the tree. So a good way to do it is you basically move on immediately when you hit the correct amount of points, spending them efficiently, to the second tree. And then when we go to the third one, the same. And then once we're at the end, we have everything we want. Then you talk about where in the entire tree you would put those last 3 or 4 points. And then at the end of this, it sounds like, okay, that extra point in essence regen is just like the best point in the tree, so we take it. So it's just for a point of conversation, not really any other reason.
yeah. So here you take tip the scales.
Okay.
Just the good ability unlocks also the left hand side of the tree for us. Then we're gonna take the increased healing. Obviously,
Yep.
we're a healer. You would take Emerald Blossom if you're focusing on Emerald Blossom in your talent tree. This is a point that you, in theory, could skip, but with tip the scales bypassing it. So let's take it for now, because I think Emerald Blossom will be like a viable playstyle, and I think at this point it makes it insanely good. It makes it heal 5 allies instead of 3, so it's like a massive increase in terms of that. You're taking the point below it to unlock the healing node below that.
Before we go on from this, though, just something to mention, that if there is a playstyle that could possibly exist as a preservation evoker, I think it would be okay to have Attune to the Dream kind of take up both of these spots, and then have Bountiful Bloom be a tangent node off of this in case you would select it. That being said, if you're basically always going to use this, and there's not like too much throughput in this tree anyway, that you're just basically always going to take throughput, but it would feel bad if you were spending a talent point on a button that you are not going to press, right? So
So basically, there are 2 spenders in Preservation, which I guess is like a fine time to talk about it. There's Echo, and then there's Emerald Blossom. They directly compete against each other for how you spend your essence. And right now, the Preservation tree itself is focused around like one side is Emerald Blossom side, the other side is like kind of Echo side. So
okay.
Basically, you'd never want to be pressing both of them as your spenders. You either focus on one or the other in the current like talent. So it seems like it's very restrictive in terms of either you're going down one spender or you're going down the other spender, and you should never talent into both at the same time.
Okay, yeah. So I would just suggest, as maybe something to consider, knowing that, is making this right side of the tree look like the left one, where you see Suffused with Powers in the same spot as Attune to the Dream. And instead of Bountiful Bloom right under it, there's just nothing. You could just move Attune to the Dream where Bountiful Bloom is, and just have Bountiful Bloom be a tangent.
Yep.
I think that's just a direct upgrade over how the tree is right now with how the class will play. All right, where do we go from here?
So we're going to take the healer mana thing, which so you need to take temper scales to get to it. The active ability, Source of Power.
Oh yeah, so yeah, magic damage taken reduced. Source of magic.
Just way too good, so you take it. You're also going to want to reach out to the left-hand side of the tree.
Grab the stamina node?
Yeah, we're going to grab the stamina node because we want the fire breath damage node.
Okay. Is this just like, do you think this is all the time, even if like a Growl's point earlier about how some healers may really not think too much about damage?
There's a talent later on where fire breath damage gets converted into healing, and you're pretty much always taking it. Like, you kind of need to take it.
Yeah.
So,
and keep in mind, a couple people in chat are mentioning that like there are scenarios where you would not take Source of Magic, like Mythic Plus, for example. We are not talking about Mythic Plus right now. We will actually, after we're done with this class tree, before we move on to the spec tree, we will be talking about how you would change this for Mythic Plus.
So. Oh yeah, I'll come in chat. Don't worry, I'll rip it apart.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I'm sure Growl's going to destroy this.
Yeah. So there's the Fire Breath instance. So right now we have this. Interesting that you didn't take Hover last 4 seconds longer.
That's like a flex point that you would
really. Okay, we'll talk about it later then. Yeah. Cool.
So we're going to continue down the healing path. The middle path, the green healing does more.
Okay.
That's just good. You'd eventually just take Zephyr because, like I said earlier, it's basically your personal / whatever, raid cooldown. We're going to go jump back to the left-hand side, and we're going to pick up... You could take, honestly, any of a Pressing Roar, the middle one, or the left one. It doesn't really matter. Like, out of those 3 choice nodes, because you just want Leaping Flames below it. So whatever path you want to take, you can. This is like a very flex point.
Do healers cast Azure Strike at all?
You can.
So,
I
so it's
mean-
very unlikely to be this. It's probably going to be like a pressing roar in a lot of situations, and then a very teched out situation where you would play Unravel. That's very rare in PvE that you
Well,
would use this.
so there's a talent on the preservation tree. I think it's like right smack dab in the middle, the glowy one. And I think what that does is when you use Azure Strike, you have a chance to proc a free essence. Basically, it's like a clear cast. I don't know if it's good. I have no idea, but that's there. So it could be a thing where you are pressing Azure Strike as a filler to get procs.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a less % chance than the Living Flame one, and Living Flame provides healing, and
Right. Well, Azure Strike you can use while moving, and it's an instant
right,
cast,
yeah.
right?
So I mean, but like hitting one additional enemy doesn't really increase the chance of that proc happening because the proc is based on the cast, not the number of enemies hit. So
Correct.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
I guess
so,
it doesn't
so
really
let's
make a point.
so let's just
yeah.
do a pressing roar for now.
sure, yeah,
and
that seems like it has the
and
most
then
widely
and then
used.
Unravel. It sounds like it'd be extremely powerful in any shit. I mean, you could always think of like Sun King and Castle Nathric, for example, where like that would just be like insanely good value. And then you're gonna grab leaping flames.
Yep. So this basically reads that whenever you press Fire Breath, you can either cleave your Living Flame to heal upwards of 4 to 5 allies. So it just turns Leaping Flame into like a chain heal on like a 30-second cooldown. Fire Breath is good for dealing damage, and it also will provide healing later on. It converts damage into healing.
Wait, it works on allies too? Oh my gosh. My
And
mind just
also,
exploded. Go back to that tool to. Oh yeah, that's
if
so
you
good,
have
though.
only one enemy and you use it on the one enemy, the extra strikes will heal allies instead. So this can be used
wow.
for DPS evokers that can convert that excess healing the excess off healing they're doing to the raid through Scarlet Adaptation. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in Max's chat, but basically you can kind of use this as like you can do damage to the boss while also healing your allies if there's only one enemy present. You can convert that healing back into damage through Scarlet Adaptation, so it's like a weird gameplay loop where it like kind of is cyclical, and it's just a cool little thing that you get to add into your gameplay.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah. It's gonna play really, really fun because you essentially want to be watching your Scarlet and like lining all that stuff up, right? Like Maevy was talking about how you want to be pressing your breath a lot, but pressing the breath juices your living flame. So you kind of want to like build up your Scarlet, then use a big breath, and then you use the flame, and you kind of like have that. You're paying attention to like all of those things in tandem. And if you're using it well, I think if the fact that it like bounces if you do damage and there's no enemies to allies is absolutely crazy. That's such a good talent.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also, in the reverse case where if somehow you are only near like one ally and you use it to heal allies, it'll deal damage to whatever excess enemies are available to deal damage to. So it works both ways.
Excellent. So now we are.
You're taking Fly With Me, and Hover has 2 charges. These are the last 2, like, quote-unquote, mandatory points.
Okay, yeah, I'm actually glad you looked at it like that. So basically, of the 6 points remaining, he's looking at hover lasting 4 seconds.
No. 2 charges of Hover.
Oh, 2 charges of hover being guaranteed, and then you're taking Fly With Me, and then Time Spiral. As good
That's
as it is as
optional.
cooldown, it's absolutely optional, which is good. Because there's scenarios where you would take it and it would be extremely powerful, and there are scenarios where you could put the point somewhere else, and they have a lot of good options. So let's now talk about where these last 4 points can really go on the tree based on the scenario.
So like I said earlier, I think the Essence generation is mandatory. Right now, a lot of the healing that you do is through Essence spenders. So getting 5% extra Essence regen, that 5% becomes 10% with the second point. It's just good. You just get more Essence. And then I would say from here, this is where you start doing the fight-by-fight tech choices of, do you want Renewing Blaze as an extra personal? Do you want to get the Fly With Me shield? Do you get Time Spiral? Do you go for Quell?
Oh,
Do
you
go
guys have so
for-
many options. Dude,
Yeah, it's insane amount.
this class tree for healer is actually like a lot more choice than damage. Like within these 4 last 3 points, you can grab Time Spiral. You can get a kick. You can get Tail Swipe, Wing Buffet based on the scenario. You could get like a faster hover based on the fight. You could get
Longer hover.
Yeah, longer hover. You could get, a really strong personal with the, with the capstone node, depending on when damage is actually happening on a fight. So 1.5 to a 1 minute, or AoE Soothe, which will certainly come into play in Mythic Plus.
And
Down
the Fly
here.
With Me shield as well.
Yeah, and Fly With Me
And
shield.
also, technically, the movement speed buff below the stamina node, which could see some use. I don't really know how valuable that is, but like, I don't know.
That's most
Could
of the
be
fight. You
some
would just be
tech.
10% faster. Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be like
Okay.
a boss where you're constantly dodging things, like say Painsmith. Having a baseline 10% movement speed would just like, if you pulled that boss 200 times, you might have like 10 or 15 less deaths because you just happen to be 10% faster.
Yeah, and if you want more damage, you could take Quell and the 2 points below Quell to help increase your like Fire Breath damage conversion into healing, as well as just doing more damage. Like that's an option. You can spend those last 3 points in that as well.
Great. So they have the choice here. Really good. Driney, how would you spend these last 2 points on most raid fights?
In raid, I don't think we would really need Quell, because
Yeah,
if we do
almost
like
never.
need an AoE stop, like we have 2 racials that can AoE stop. We have the Wing Buffet and Tail Swipe, which are pretty nuts for racials.
Is it was it Wing Buffet?
Yeah.
Okay. Definitely not Buffett. Yeah.
Who the fuck knows?
Buffet, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But,
I
what
think
Maevy
you're-
said, yeah. I think you take Renewing Blaze and Twin Guardian.
Renewing Blaze and Twin Guardian with do you get the capstone? I think the capstone is absolutely dependent on the fight. The second one's dog shit, so I think I think it's Twin Guardian and that, and then you just have 1 point. Like I said,
I flex cooldown reduction on the defensive below the slow node at like the very top middle.
Oh
It's
yeah.
okay-ish, I guess.
You could also take the root up top if you need it for something like Lahuvum for ads like that.
Oh, this is so nice. This is so nice. This is like, of all the class trees I've looked at, this has like so many, and you can get CC, you can get 2 things of CC. This is very, very good. I would say one maybe small problem for Healer 2 before we move on to Mythic Plus is the fact that if you really did need this root and you really wanted the node that affected it, as a healer, you would have to get Disintegrate channels faster, which could never possibly affect you. So
Disintegrate is so anti-synergistic with the spec as well, because Disintegrate costs 3 essence, and like I said earlier, essence is where most of your healing comes from. So that's a really dead talent for healers.
Yeah, and even if it was like a do damage build or whatever, it would be like doing channeling faster is like the worst possible increased damage kind of situation, right? Like that's so that's just not good. Okay, so Driney, you have one more point, man. Where's it going before we move on to Growl?
Scroll down a bit. Yeah, it's either Renewing Blaze or Time Spiral. I mean, it just depends on the fight, I guess.
Okay.
Whatever you need, Time Spiral, Renewing Blaze, or Root, just depends.
Hover
Amen.
lasting 4 seconds longer is also okay-ish, I think.
Also, if you needed to move down this tree and for whatever reason you didn't want to take Scarlet Adaptation, which you probably will, you could also open up that point there and keep the essence too. All right, so Growl, tear this shit up. This is
Honestly,
Mythic Plus only healing.
So honestly, the Living Flame talent in the bottom left, I didn't know how it synergized with heals and combination. So it actually looks very similar in M+. So a couple of things I would say that are different is that left side of the tree with Quell and then the talent under it, so the interrupt. The interrupt in the top left, and then also the increased magic damage. Those are going to be probably mandatory things that you want to have if you are caring about damage. Also, you maybe want to take the improved wall on certain dungeons. I think it's just going to be really, really super fight specific. And the talent under that as well, the one that reduces Wing Buffet and Tail Swipe, that's going to be extremely valuable. The fact that you have 2 different stops, one of them on a 45-second and one on a minute and a half, is absolutely nutty. So, but the backbone of the tree is very similar. You know, in Mythic Plus, that's like the gameplay loop is you want that Scarlet Adaptation in the top right. You want to go down for the Living Flame split talent in the bottom left, and then you're going for Zephyr. And just the utility changes from dungeon to dungeon, honestly. It just fully depends on you know, do you need interrupts? Do you need this? Like, I can see in Pugs, you probably care a little bit less about like the interrupts and the coordination.
How do you
stuff,
feel
and
about
just
essence
kinda...
regenerating as a Mythic Plus healer?
It's less valuable for sure. Now, the thing is, though, you sort of want to go towards that interrupt anyway. Like, the interrupt is so important. And so the question is just, do you want to try and save a point by going for the mass route way? You sort of can, but I feel like chances are, like, unless you need the mass route, like the very top left stuff, it's just going to be worth it to take the essence regen, because it's just like, well, it's just going to be so much more useful because you need the wall anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. So far I just went and grabbed this kick, grabbed the magic damage reduction, grabbed the fire breath instant damage, 2 points.
Yep.
Grabbed tip the scales, gonna grab the healing increase, and now take me down a Mythic Plus. Notice that for everyone that we are saving 3 points most likely by not getting Source of Magic in Mythic Plus. So that also helps you at the bottom of the tree a lot.
Yep, that's essentially where you're getting those extra points from. So on the right side, I would still go down through Bountiful Bloom. I would grab Ancient Flame. I would grab probably the the increased green healing one, but that's optional, I think, in dungeons where you're comfortable and you don't need that healing. So I would say as a default, most people would probably start with that, but you could also go down the left.
Definitely Zephyr.
I would say, yep, definitely Zephyr. I would take Fly with me. I think the shield is optional. I feel like it's a little bit clunky to like use on your tank or whatever. I'd also take Hover, gets a charge, and then I probably wouldn't be using Time Spiral.
No shot, yeah.
Yeah, I think, and then on the left we need that fire one right there. So we could take whatever, a pressing roar or the middle one, probably roar most of the time, unless there's shields in the dungeon. Then we want leaping flames.
How often do you use your healer breath?
I think in some dungeons you could take that, but honestly, we have so much CC. Like, it sort of depends on the team that you're in. A lot of times what happens in M+ is you have like a warlock with an AoE stun and a hunter with an AoE stun, and then you don't necessarily need that AoE stun, but if you do end up with a group that doesn't have those AoE stuns, that's definitely an optional. How many points do we have left?
You have more than a few. I think you have 4. It's like a decent
We have
amount.
4. I really like hover move speed. To me, that feels really, really strong.
Really?
And yeah, I think I mean I love moving fast, and I also feel like 25-yard range is going to affect you more in Mythic Plus than you might think it does, just because like range DPS are always 40 yards away from the pack. Like they're just always standing as far away as possible, not wanting to do mechanics. So then again, here's where you have all your optionals, and I don't even think there's ever a right answer. I think the personal, the renewing blaze or whatever, that would something you would take in some fights.
I don't think you'd
Twin
ever.
Guardian.
I don't know if you'd take Twin Guardian in Mythic Plus.
So the situation, I think in a normal scenario, probably not. The situations I see are in heavy group damage situations. Like think of the same way that you use Zephyr for your party in raid. You might use like, let's say you have a hunter who you're worried about getting one shot and you're worried about getting one shot. So like before a big AoE group damage
Very
thing,
true.
you just Twin Guardian the hunter, and then
Yeah,
you use
really
that
true.
as like so it wouldn't be useful in all dungeons, but definitely some.
Okay,
And,
great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, we did go over a lot of the utility options. It does work the same in
Yeah,
Plus
one
as
thing
well.
for sure to mention is that like I think that Mythic Plus is definitely the only spot where I think you'd be taking like the AoE
Yep.
soothe, and then which is actually really nice too. That like a 2-minute soothe sounds like ridiculous, but the fact that every enrage you take off actually reduces this by 20 seconds is like a really nice thing that goes with it. Also, yeah, you have incapacitate an enemy for 20 seconds on a 15-second cooldown, basically perma CC, right? Off CC. You have probably unlikely the kick for essence. I went ahead and grabbed the tail swipe cooldown. You could pick either one for you. This is one talent. Before we move on, this is one talent I don't know if you would take almost ever.
Yeah, I think I think it's not bad, but there's just so many good options.
Yeah.
I think that's not like
It's one thing that I took initially in my like DPS Evoker tree. I'm like, wow, that's sick, and then I'm just like, wait, there's just like way too much good stuff here. So it's like this is, and I would actually argue to them to make this baseline because I think it actually is nice, but it's never good enough to select. So I would like to have it be used, but currently I don't think you would use this the entire expansion outside of like a very niche scenario. All right.
Real quick, is the stamina not mandatory for you, Grell? Because
it's optional, I think. for
converts
some,
into HPS and DPS in the healer tree. Like I think that node is absolutely.
in what way does it help your? What are you thinking of the?
So there's a node called Life Force Mender. It's like true middle of the tree.
below the
It's a little
essence strike.
eyeball. It basically converts your health into living flame and fire breath damage. And right now, as of right now, which I think is probably bugged, each tick of fire breath gets scaled by this instead of it being dispersed over the duration of the dot. So I think Life Force Mender is just insane, and so you pretty much need to take the stamina to get more benefit, and also stamina's good. So.
Also, just want to point one thing out because chat is hard stun locked on the fact that you said Hunter AoE stun. I'm pretty sure you just misspoke or were referring to like Binding Shot or something. But yeah, they're very upset about that.
Yeah. I meant Warlock and then Windwalker, and then you also have single target stuns with the Blood Decay and Hunter was what my words should have been.
Yeah, amen. All right, cool. All right, we are now back to a raid build. We are doing a raid build on the preservation tree. So Maevy and Driney, take me down where you guys think you would make a lot of decisions.
I'll let Maevy go over his 10 different builds he has lined up for you.
All right. So I'll just go over like the mandatory stuff, I guess. In the top, we're gonna take the top 8 points, except for the bottom right one.
Okay.
We can go through them one by one if you want to. But
I would like to do that. Yeah. So
So
This is
the top. Well, let's start at the top, right? Because it's like the bread and butter, like the very, very top.
Mhm.
The first point you take. Reversion. It's essentially Renewing Mist / Riptide, if you want to think about it like that.
Okay.
Really cool. When it crits, its duration is extended, so there's just built-in crit synergy with it. Sick.
Also, right now it's bugged, I think, because if you have multiple evokers with that buff on someone, and if any of those hots tick, it refreshes or like it extends the hot on like all 2 or 3,
Okay,
however
yeah,
many
that's just
hots
a
are on them.
that's a
But
very simple
notably,
fix. Yeah.
if you go down to the bottom right to Echo, you can Echo reversions, and they give you 2 separate buffs. And then, but those, when they individually crit, do not refresh or do not like give you extension on the other type, if that makes sense. So there's a bug with multiple evokers where reversions do crit and give you longer duration, but with single evokers through Echo reversion, that doesn't work. So I'm assuming it's supposed to work the way that the Echo version does, where it's not based on all the other reversions. Echo right now is either a great spender or a terrible spender, depending on how you spec into it. So, but you need to take this to get down to the bottom right, which is your raid cooldown, rewind. Essentially, this just reads as 50% of the damage you take that you've taken in the last 5 seconds. You heal as a hot in the next 5 seconds from when you press rewind.
Okay, how is that actually gonna? It's kind of hard to understand how that will look if you've used it. Like, kind of, does it like so? Is the hot
There's
just
a rolling snapshot of the last 5 seconds of damage that you took. It's like if you were to look in your combat log and you took like, big spike damage,
Yeah.
big spike damage, or like, big spike damage, then dot, 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 then rewind happened. And all those were in the last 5 seconds. Rewind would look at your combat log and go, okay, so I'm going to heal for 50% of the big spike damage and 50% of each of these dots, but it's going to be spread out over the
and
next
it's
5
spread out
seconds.
evenly, so it's not
Yeah, evenly.
it's not exactly like at the same intervals that it happened within the previous 5 seconds.
Correct.
It's going okay. That makes sense.
And in Mythic Plus, this becomes 100% of the damage that you took, because it says healing is increased by 100% when you're not raid. So small group content just gets you kind of can't die for 5 seconds, sort of.
Is it red like that? I thought it's just like the hot is just increased by 100%, not the damage taken.
So yeah, I mean, well, technically, yeah. So if it's healing for 50% of the damage you take, and then you're increasing that by doubling it, you're essentially just healing back 100% of the damage you took, right? So it mathematically works out to be the same.
Okay.
The middle thing is Essence Burst.
Yep.
If you've looked at DPS version of this, I'm assuming you haven't, but Living Flames, 20% chance to make your next Essence ability free. This has
Yep.
like a 15-second duration. Very, very solid.
Can stack
Living
to 2 as well, right?
Yes. Baseline is stacks to 2 for healers. I know
Oh,
for DPS
interesting.
they're
Yeah,
talented.
DPS has the talent into it. Yep.
Temporal Compression.
Well, let's look at Dream Breath.
Yeah, Dream Breath, sorry. This is your first Empower spell as a healer. Kind of works the same way as Flame Breath, except it's a much wider cone. Also, the longer you hold it, the less of a cooldown it has. So later on, you're going to be able to get this to Empower level 4. At that point, it starts incurring a 10-second cooldown instead of a 25-second cooldown or a 15-second cooldown. So, you definitely want to hold this for the longest duration, and it's a big mana dump when you start holding it for long. Obviously, the healing ramps up over the empowerments, but the healing baseline is just kind of okay at rank 1, so you're mostly holding this down for the cooldown reduction more so than the healing increase.
Okay.
But there is a slight healing increase with it.
If you were to compare that to Lighted On, because I hopped on my Pally just to compare, and it's pretty funny how much a rank 1 Dream Breath does compared to Lighted On right now. But I'm sure it's, the knob's cranked up a little bit. I think a rank 1, I think the tooltip's pretty accurate to how much it actually heals, just bang on your gear. But a Lighted On was healing for like 3 or 4k, which is kind of funny compared to a rank 1 Dream Breath.
Yeah,
Damage heals for about like 10 or 8 or
I
10K
think
or
one
something.
thing we're going to realize is that the numbers are or the knobs have been cranked in many directions on this class compared to a lot of other classes. You'll definitely see that in the way that the DPS is doing damage right now. So I imagine that'll probably get looked at. Down under that, you have temporal
So this
compression.
is insanely good for Echo builds, because in a Echo build, Echo is a bronze spell and Reversion is a bronze spell, and they're pretty much your only 2 bronze spells that you have besides Rewind. So they're your only 2 like spammable bronze spells. But essentially what Temporal Compression says is each time you cast a bronze spell, your next power spell reaches the maximum time in 5% less time, stacked up to 4 times. So this is like haste for the cast time of empowered spells.
Oh, that's really cool.
Which, yeah, so when you play around it, it's insanely, insanely strong. But when you're not playing around Echo, you pretty much only ever have 1 or maybe 2 of these stacked up when you cast an empowered spell. So it's like
Okay.
the talent below that is Spirit Bloom. This is essentially empower chain heal. If you can think about it like that, where
Okay.
basically the longer you empower it, the more allies it heals. It acts as chain heal. If you echo a Spirit Bloom, each person that you echoed, so it will replicate the full effect. So if you hold down a rank 3 Spirit Bloom, it heals 3 people. If you have an echo out, that echo will also heal 3 people. This is the only spell that works in that way in terms of multiplying AoE heals. All your other AoE heals only heal the echo person for a single healing amount. It doesn't like replicate. So this is the current build that makes echo insanely strong. And if that interaction gets fixed, pretty much echo becomes much less important
Okay.
overall. So if you imagine you have a bunch of echoes out, you cast that, it makes a lot of chain heals.
Okay. That is something where so this is there's a problematic like empower node for DPS called Eternity Surge, and it kind of has a very similar wording where every time it empowers, it just hits another enemy. I feel like this makes a lot more sense for healing to work like that, where I feel like the DPS Eternity Surge thing probably needs to be reworked because it feels way worse.
For healing, increasing the number of targets you heal, that's like just a straight up gain in all scenarios. So it's always beneficial.
Okay, so now, and then you also have just Fire Breath heals a nearby injured ally for 80% of the damage done. That includes the hot?
Includes the initial damage and the dot. So if you hit multiple enemies with Fire Breath, all the dots get added together, then multiplied by 0.8. Then that heals a single ally. You don't get like multiple small allies, but it's a lot of healing on a single person when you have multi-target.
And you can't, and it's nearby, so it's like, is it a smart
Random,
heal?
I'm pretty sure.
It seems to be random injured, not.
It could be a smart heal. It's hard to test, I
Yeah.
guess, that right now since I haven't done dungeon or raid or any of that.
I feel like they might, the way that you described that, how it like multiplies and then it just heals to a single person, I think it might actually be a bit better if it was just more deterministic, or if it just healed more people with that same amount.
Yeah, I just noticed that's how it works. I don't really know as of right now which would feel better, but it seems all right.
It's definitely good to be in the game that when you press Fire Breath, which is part of your regular kit, it also just does healing. So healers are interacting with that button. It's a good thing to be in the game. So one thing you guys skipped here is time dilation. I actually want to talk about.
This is your tank cooldown. So what I meant by this isn't mandatory is this is like one of the points where you either spec into it or you don't, whether or not you need a tank cooldown. I think most times you would spec into it though, like 99.9% of the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't see how you pass this, and it's in my opinion, it's not like it's a tank cooldown. It's a DPS like some sort of a dot cooldown. It's a somebody has to run out of the raid cooldown. It's like that is so insanely powerful. I could never see.
And it's on a really short cooldown.
Yeah, it's on a really This is what I like when I'm thinking of like a tank pulling a bunch of mobs in Mythic Plus. I'm pretty sure this is the best external in the game by far.
Yeah, and if you can amp it to 70% of the damage done with the choice node below it, which we'll get into in a second,
that is also something that will have just insane applications in raid for people to solo a giant meteor soak that they otherwise would not be able to, and you just heal them as a hot instead. That is like fucking crazy powerful in all content. But we'll so he said you're definitely going to take that, definitely continue down with the raid thing and just talk about pure throughput and where you go from
this
here.
is where things start to get a little messy depending on what build you want to play, what style you want to play, whether it's bronze healer or whether it's green Dragonflight healer. No matter what, you're taking the point below Spirit Bloom for all builds. Depending on which one you want to go, if you go Emerald, you take the Essence regeneration because Emerald Bloom or Emerald, the flower thing, costs more Essence than Echo. So you need more Essence regenerate. If you're playing the Echo build, you need the cooldown path because this is your detonator for your echoes, and every 15 seconds you're tossing out 2 or 3 echoes and you're casting a Spirit Bloom to detonate them.
Okay.
The middle path, you're going to take the dead set middle Essence Strike. You're completely ignoring what this says for the most part. You're almost never casting Azure Strike unless you're on the move. But the points below that, you're taking at least 2 points here. Mostly just because you're constrained by what else you need to spend to get to the next tier. You would like to put a 3rd point into this if you could.
Okay, let's just forget that for now, and let's go with the other ones you're definitely going to fill, and then we'll put up Life Force Mender later.
Yeah, so no matter what, you're taking the right Golden Hour. This basically just turns Reversion into Riptide. So, but it's kind of like Rewind, where the past 5 seconds of damage you took, you're going to instantly heal them for 15% of that amount
Oh,
of
okay,
damage.
that's pretty cool.
So from here, this is where you decide whether you're playing Echo or you're playing Emerald Blossom. If you're playing Echo, you take the points below the point you just put in to
Okay.
make Echo replicate 10% more healing per point. Or if you're playing Emerald Blossom, you put them into the green seed icon on the opposite side.
Okay, let's probably do the build, and let's just say you're going to play Spirit Bloom, not an Echo build, for the sake of argument, and then we'll
Sure.
see where
So we're
that's
playing seeds.
Yep.
Fluttering Seedlings and the one below it. So basically, Fluttering Seedlings, when you cast a Blossom, it'll shoot out 3 little seeds. They heal for 90% of spell power, and it prefers to heal people seemingly farther away from your Emerald Blossom rather than people inside. It's really hard to tell, though.
I'm not sure why it's 60 yards, but that's kind of crazy. It's 60 yards.
It's 30.
Is it? It says 30 on
Yeah,
here.
it's 30 yards.
Oh, okay.
And then the one after that is 30% chance that one of those seeds re-blossoms into another blossom. So Emerald Blossom is like a baseline ability.
Yeah.
So, but it's a 30% chance that only one seed. So it's decided when the seeds burst, which seed it'll be that blossoms, and then that only that one can blossom, and then that blossom will blossom and create 3 more seeds, and it can chain infinitely technically, but obviously every single time it chains, you lose. You only have a 30% chance that one of those seeds continues on.
It might.
So you can't like.
Have you
super
tested
high
that
roll.
it can continue to chain? Because I think that
Yep.
might be okay. Never mind.
We've seen at least 4 chains in a row.
Sure. All right. Where are you going down from here?
So again, becomes like one of those weird nodes where you kind of want to look at what capstones you want, depending on which pathing you want to take.
Okay.
So if you're looking to go to right now, you can only take 2 capstones, and ideally you want to take 2 capstones in a lot of builds. So you're either looking to take Dreamflight, which is basically the bombing run DPS ability, but it's healing instead. It does a lot of healing right now. It's currently insanely overtuned. Does
Yeah,
not have
really
a target
strong.
cap. Doesn't have a target cap. No square root scaling. It just the amount of targets you fly over gets multiplied by that many targets. Insanely strong in large group content.
Okay.
Stasis is the next one over. Basically, you cast Stasis. The next 3 spells you cast are locked in place, and the targets that you selected are also locked in place. So if you cast Emerald Blossom on, let's say, Driney, Emerald Blossom on me, and then Emerald Blossom on Growl, it'll cast Emerald Blossom on Driney, me, Growl. When you unleash the stasis. So the targets are set in place,
so
and the
fucking
spells
cool.
are set in place. And yeah, you're going to use this as basically essence spenders, or if you cast let's say, rank 3, like a max rank Dream Breath during this, it'll release an instant max rank Dream Breath when you release it. Sorry, words are hard. So essentially, it's a big healing cooldown and a 1.5 minute cooldown where you just choose what targets you want, what spells you want, and then you release it upwards of 30 seconds later. So it's a big prep thing.
Yeah, but I mean that's like really fun and cool to plan around for like high level content for sure. Like that sounds so insane. These two are something they've done really well with this tree so far is the fact that they have to everyone's done these differently. Some of these trees you can get like a lot of capstone nodes. Some trees have like 6 capstone nodes. This one made 3 and it looks like they're all like extremely powerful, right? So
the last one is only good if you take Emerald Blossom build because it directly interacts with Emerald Blossom, but essentially it makes Emerald Blossoms into mini Cloudburst totems. So they only store 5% of your healing, but when you get a lot of chains going on, you get a lot of healing out of this. It feels really, really good.
Okay. So what do you give up to play an Emerald Blossom build then? I'm sure you take Dreamflight and Cycle?
You would typically take Stasis and Cycle, or Dreamflight and Cycle, or you could, for Emerald Blossom build, you could even take Dreamflight and Stasis, depending on what kind of healing profile you want. If you want a lot of burst raid healing,
dude, this class is
you're
fucking
almost always
ridiculous.
taking Stasis. But whether you want to do like a lot of like little consistent throughput, you take Cycle. If you want to do like a big burst every minute, you take Dreamflight.
Okay.
You could also technically just not spec a capstone. You could spec only Stasis as your capstone, and then the talent row 2 rows up from your capstones. There's a lot of 1-point nodes there. You want almost all of them for almost any build you play.
Okay, so this is just cracked.
Yeah. So for now, let's take Call Sarah, which is the true 1-point middle. Yeah, that one. And then we can also, from here, you kind of flex the point above Call Sarah just for extra damage and healing conversion through Living Flame and Flame Breath.
Okay.
And then from here, like, any point you want. You could take Lifebind. You could go up to the left of Lifebind. There's like an Emerald Communion. It's It's basically an Evocate that gives you 10% of your mana back and 100% of your health. And if you're at full health, the healing gets transferred to an ally instead. So like, it's on a
Dude,
3-minute
they have
cooldown.
so much cool shit. Why do they have so much cool shit?
I
Like
don't know,
all of
it's-
these buttons, if you were to like think of almost every single one of their buttons, if you were to think of like something another healer has that's close to it, it's just a way OP better version of that. Like
Yeah,
their
you can also
external.
clear time dilation. Like, there's a lot of things you can do from here just to get to the next point. But yeah, from here it's pretty much dealer's choice.
Damn. Okay, well,
think
be the
usually
dealer
take
real
time
quick.
dilation.
We don't have
Probably
an
time
insane-
dilation. Let's just take,
Probably time dilation. Okay.
yeah,
and then
just because.
and then we're
So
grabbing
here-
stasis, right?
Yeah, so you could go path multiple different ways to get to stasis. If you want to focus on power spells, you take the middle path. If you want to focus on rewind, this is a choice node to make rewind into a 3-minute cooldown, or have 2 charges but cut the healing that it doesn't have. So for Mythic Plus, you could basically get this to be like a 50% rewind, but you have 2 charges of it, or an arena or something like that. In raid, you're probably taking the minute off, or you're ignoring this altogether if you don't need rewind more than once every 4 minutes.
Okay.
So I guess if you want to go like a cycle stasis build, you pretty much have to take the rewind point, because otherwise you can't get down to cycle, which is the bottom right. And then from here you continue on to your capstones. Timeless Magic increases the duration of reversion, which is your Riptide Renewing Mist thing. Time Dilation, which is your tank external, so you get an extra 6 seconds on your tank external. And Echo, which you wouldn't really use for a cycle build, so it
Yeah, it
feels
doesn't
weird that it extends Echo, but then the point below it interacts with Emerald Blossom.
I would look at it as probably like this. The thing that makes this weird is it does make Echo last 2 seconds longer, but just imagine they just threw that on there, and the other 2 were the main ones they were talking about, I think. And it's also
Yeah, I just don't
another
see how,
reason
like-
is it's like a very bronzy type thing, and it's clearly talking about and including the like bronze things that are directly in this line. But you are right that it's like the
Right, then the capstone is green, so it confuses me because of that. But
Yeah, okay.
I mean, maybe there's a different way you can set this up where maybe stasis gets moved to cycle and cycle gets moved to stasis, but then that locks out a lot of possibilities. I don't know. So we're gonna go stasis. So we're taking Grace Period, which says 15% increased healing on targets with reversion. So basically, your Riptide just boosts your other healing on your target by 15%.
that seems kind of weak.
It's honestly kind of good, because if you were to echo like a reversion on like a tank, you get a 30% boost to the tank. Depending on how many reversions you can have out at a time. It seems weak, but
Yeah.
It's a pretty solid.
yeah, it's pretty solid. But also, I want to
Third
see all these 3-point nodes turn into 2-point nodes at the same value. Basically, that's what I'm going to get to eventually. But
Okay, sure.
like right now, having to spend 3 points in any of these just doesn't feel good. If you only had to spend 2 points to get the same amount of effect, it would feel good.
This is a consistent topic throughout all the class trees we have looked at, and that is that anytime you have to, there are multiple nodes where you have to spend 1 or 2 to get to the capstone, and then they're rivaled by ones where you have to spend 3, or even in some ridiculous cases you have to spend like almost 5. And that could make sense in the tree if that thing you had to spend 5 to get was unbelievably powerful. So it's like, okay, well, it makes sense that I have to invest in it because it's so much better than the other ones. That makes sense. The issue is they haven't been able to like balance that to where those things are at that power level. So basically all of them feel bad in both class and spec trees, where you have a triple capstone or triple leading up to a capstone. So that's definitely good feedback.
Yeah, and then from here, you're basically going to take any of the 1-point nodes you can take in the third to bottom row of the tree. These are all incredibly powerful. So, like, currently what we have access to is either mana reduction or in power spells. You'd flex between these as you would see fit. In power spells, if you want more healing, mana reduction if you want to save some mana. So that's just the current Emerald Blossom tree that I have like crafted up in my head, kind of thing. Who knows how it'll actually play out numbers wise, because obviously tuning's not done.
I
But
feel
it looks
like there's a
something like
lot of cases in Raid specifically where you would definitely just take Dreamflight.
Yeah, I mean, you could
Too.
easily just spec out of the right-hand side and go down to Dreamflight instead.
Yeah.
Or take out Stasis and go to Dream. Like, there's a lot of flexibility in those bottom points, but I think being able to get all 3 would be way broken overpowered. So that's why I say, like, make each of these 3-point nodes down here into 2-point nodes. You still couldn't get the other capstone, but you could get a lot of the flex points above it, which
Change your gameplay.
Oh, they change your gameplay a whole bunch, because the ones on the right, if you read those, like the one on the far right, or sorry, the far left, I'm stupid. directions are hard. Consuming a full temporal compression gains you Essence Burst. The one next to it says whenever you gain Essence Burst, your crit healing is increased by 50% for 8
That
seconds.
talent is
In game,
broken.
it's only 20. It says 20%, but the buff gives you 50%. So those two combined are incredibly powerful, because you consume a temporal compression by casting a full Empower spell. Then you get an Essence Burst, which increases the crit healing of that
You
Empower
can pretty much
spell.
have that buff up like almost 100% of the time if you really want to like fish for that
Yeah.
proc.
And then you go for the extra Empower stage, which is the true middle of all those 7 points. And you get an extra Empower stage. So now, like, you're really focusing on Empower spells, but you can't do that in this current tree because you just don't have enough points if you want 2 capstones.
Yeah, I see what you
Also,
mean. Okay.
something to note is the second to right, that one, garbage. Why is it there? I don't understand it. It makes no sense. You never cast Disintegrate. There's no other synergies to Disintegrate. The mana restored is bad. I don't get it. Like, I just don't understand what this does.
It's
I don't-
probably just an idea to weave in like a build where you'd be pressing Disintegrate, but it sounds like in both of your builds you would almost never be doing that.
Insanely essence starved. Like, you don't have the essence to cast Disintegrate, except maybe on pull. You'd cast it just to get your essences like on cooldown where there's no
Sure.
damage going out.
Yeah, but you'd never press it. And then the other one is just Reversion, has 2 charges. Makes sense.
Very good flex talent for if you're focusing on like a reversion based build. There is a build where you have reversion. We skipped temporal anomaly on the right hand side of the tree, up, and that currently
It's like a
acts as
fireball.
a frozen orb / chi burst. It's really weird. It costs way too much mana. It makes no sense. in terms of, like,
13% of base mana?
makes
Yeah,
no sense.
it's
It's also
bad.
haste scaled cooldown, so when you're scaling, you're stacking a lot of haste in this class, so you're just dumping all your mana instantly. If you thought Mistweavers were bad on mana, boy oh boy, if any Evoker specs into this, it, like,
Pretty nearly
design,
like-
current
I'm
tuning,
pretty sure there's just a dot missing. Like it's just like 1.3% of base mana. or
yeah, if
something.
it was 1.3, maybe it's fine. I don't know. It would be interesting to play around with, but yeah, that's yikes.
Very interesting. Okay, so before we do a Mythic Plus version, because we do want to start the DPS one soon. Actually, wait, does Mythic Plus go the Echo route?
You basically take everything on top, I think, just like the raid build.
Well, because I just want to know, like, I don't know if I need to have him fully explain, like, how you do the Echo build instead. Like, I don't know how much of that exactly changes. Here, maybe I need you to speedrun it, okay? And then we'll do
My
Mythic Plus.
personal opinion, I think he can definitely still go over it, but I think that synergy of Echo working with Spirit Bloom probably is unintended. I feel
Probably
like that's gonna
unintended,
get changed.
But
Yeah.
if it isn't, let's just quickly go through it just in case.
Okay,
So,
cool.
Talent plus Spirit Bloom, convert that to CDR.
Okay.
Because you need to. Take
Yep.
out all the points out of the seed shit on the left-hand side.
Yep.
That's bad. Take the little hourglass thing on the mid-right. Down below, go to the Echo stuff. On the far left, you're taking the outside nodes just to path better.
This?
Yep. Yeah, you don't really care about what this does because you just need to get to the stuff below it.
Okay, kind of a problem, but moving on.
Yep.
I'll
You don't
just-
care about what this does, either movement or health. Cool. You're taking Lifebind because you want the stuff below it. Here you're going into the true middle of the tree to get like some of that, Essence Strike and the good health conversion stuff. Very good. So now you're going bottom left in the 1 point row. You're grabbing Sacral Empowerment, and the one to the right of it, you're gonna grab Call of Ysera, which is, that one. You're gonna take Empowerment level 4, which is the one below that. And then from here, you can choose to go into either Stasis or Dream Breath as your capstones, and that's about it.
Okay, you can only choose one, right?
Yep, you choose one, and then you have like one more flex point, I think,
Okay, and then
which could be like rewind cooldown or increasing your tank external or time of need.
So instead of we've already talked about a lot of things that could go into. Let's just talk about some other stuff we haven't talked about in the tree at all, and that would be time of need.
So this is just like essentially a pseudo cheat death. Whenever you or an ally fall below 20% health, a little AI shows up and casts Living Flame on your ally a whole bunch for 8 seconds.
This is also bugged as well. If you have 2 Evokers in your raid or party or whatever, and I guess 2 either Evokers because you can't have 2 in like a Mythic Plus. But me and Belay were testing it the other day, and we both talented into that point. And if I were to fall below 20%, it would proc his and not mine. So I guess it's an easy fix, but it's just a silly bug that's in the game right now.
Okay, so unlikely to take it. All right, Growl, Mythic Plus gang, all gone. What are we doing?
All gone. So I have actually the whole top of the tree. I have all 9 points. I mean, you have to spend 8 of them anyway. I feel like there's no way you don't take time dilation. And then also the one difference is that one below time dilation, the one that buffs it. I think that's definitely worth taking. The delays 70% of damage. It's, I guess, a flex. You don't necessarily have to, but I think that spell seems really, really good.
Okay.
I would definitely take, sorry, I'm trying to see all the names. I think you'd probably still take one of the ones on the left side below Spirit Bloom. I'm not sure yet. That's one that I have to play around and kind of feel. I feel like you're probably not pressing Spirit Bloom too often, so I probably would take... I don't think the CDR on it is going to be that good. You probably take the one that gives you Essence Regen. Another thing I want to point out, all the way in the top left, it's not a talent change, but... So Dream Breath, if you look at the way it scales, it reduces the cooldown a lot, but it doesn't actually scale the healing that much. And one thing that's actually interesting in Mythic Plus is it might actually be correct to be using just rank 1 Dream Breath and just rip it, because channeling it longer doesn't really give you that much benefit if you don't need to press it on cooldown, right? Like in a raid, you're pressing it over and over again for throughput and to build your empowers. But in Mythic Plus, it might be just be a thing where you just like charge it to 1 and then use it and just not use it as often.
Okay.
Which I think is like kind of cool difference in gameplay. Again, it's not something you change talent-wise.
I want to say, outside of maybe one ability being Spirit Bloom, I think that every empower ability that currently exists for Evoker seems under-realized and could be much more creative and good.
I agree.
Yeah, they all like reducing a cooldown by holding it, but you're holding it longer, which means the cooldown matters less. And then like obviously the DPS ones are like pretty problematic. Yeah, I think in general they should definitely go back to the drawing board a bit on how empowers are going to affect these abilities. It definitely seems very boring overall. Continue down.
Yep. So another button, maybe didn't talk about this one at all. I'm kind of interested. Emerald Communion. You just don't think you have the points to use this? Because this essentially gives you like 10% mana and a full heal every 3 minutes. You just think it's not worth using. You also can use it when feared or stunned or whatever.
Yeah, the mana return just seems a little bit too low to warrant using it as like a mana tool. As a personal like health regen tool, like could be good. But I just think there's a lot of other points in this section here that are just so much more valuable, because there's a lot of 3-point nodes here that give you a lot of damage or healing or both.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Depending on the dungeon, I think it's hard to say like how much mana you're gonna need, right? Depending on like, I have to see it, but I did have a point in that one in Emerald Communion on the left side. So I went for 3 points in Fluttering Seedlings, and I'm kind of doing like a similar Blossom build. The difference is some of the stuff on the bottom right, I think, so some of the stuff at the end is a little bit less good for Mythic Plus, mainly like the capstones, and actually some of the like higher up ones, like Maevy was saying that they're all good. So I might do like a 1 capstone kind of build. So I'm actually looking at my tree. So I have 1 point in Golden Hour on the 5th row, the one that immediately heals for reversion, just because we're trying to fill that out. I also have 3 points in Life Force Mender. That's the one that's going to be increasing your damage. And I do have Field of Dreams as well, the one to the left, and then the Call of Ysera one in the very middle bottom. And then that will unlock the rest of the tree. The annoying thing is there is some cool things that you can't really get, namely Timekeeper. Reversion has 2 charges. I feel like that's going to be really good in Mythic Plus. But you can kind of see, like, there's not really that much, unless we want to spend 3 points in Echo replicating more healing. It's really hard to get down there, because there's that temporal anomaly, that orb that like costs a quarter of your mana or whatever.
My solution to that was just to go through temporal anomaly to skip the echo healing if you want
right,
to,
yeah.
which is really bad design. Like you're saving a point to get a point that you want later on. It feels bad.
Yep. So for me, the biggest problem that I have with the tree is right there. In order to get down into the bottom right, I have to spend stuff on like AoE raid healing stuff after I already have so many AoE talents, like buffing Spirit Bloom, buffing Seedlings. Like I have so many freaking AoE talents, and then it wants me to take another AoE button when I already have like 4 that I'm like full channeling. So I didn't go down that way. I essentially took so I went straight down the middle. You can do that now, right? So I took Font of Magic to improve Empower spells. I took Grace Period. I think Grace Period, it might not be as good in Raid, but in M+, it's going to be really, really good, because most of the time, whoever you're healing is going to have reversion.
Definitely way better in a
especially if
group.
you're having really big crit.
And then Stasis.
And I did take Stasis as well. I'm not sure. It's definitely a button that I want to play around with. just to like see how it works. But it's only a 1-pointer, and I think Grace Period's really good. From there, you can go a lot of different options. So I don't know how mana is gonna be. So you could take Grove Tender, the one that reduces the mana cost of your spells, but you may not need that at all, right? And then again, like Lifebind, the one that like gives you a little buff on rescue, you may take that one as well. Exhilarating Burst, I think might be worth taking. So like kind of the thing I have right now is I have like Lifebind and I have Exhilarating Burst, just because I feel like I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but like they were saying in Raid, you have very, very high uptime on that buff. And so considering that you're already building like a high crit build because of reversion and because like crit helps your damage too and M+, like having a high uptime buff that increases your critical healing is going to be pretty good.
Okay.
The problem is all the stuff in the bottom left I don't think is super useful. Dreamflight could be good, but chances are it's going to be scaled for raid and not for anything else. How many points do we have left, if any?
Oh, 0.
0, yeah. So I think this is somewhere in my idea, but there's a lot of different things that I'm not sure about. Like, for instance, the Grove Tender and Emerald Communion, both, like, if we don't need mana, if we end up with, like, an buff that's filling us up, we may decide to go down the bottom right instead.
I really think in Mythic Plus, with this being, like, you guys are talking about, like, the tuning of this right now, this is just a Mythic Plus button, right?
It probably should be, yeah. It's frozen.
Yeah.
It sticks to injured allies, so it shoots out really fast like Frozen Orb, but once it hits an ally, it slows down like Frozen Orb does.
Oh, okay, because I was playing around with this spell, but I never hit someone who was injured. Because for me, it just flew past them, and I'm like, it felt really clunky.
Yeah,
so
really
I think it's very possible that you end up taking no point, like you don't take some of the stuff in the bottom left, you don't take Emerald Communion, and maybe you go down the right side and you try and do some build with Temporal Anomaly,
charges of reversion.
Yeah, then you can get down to the 2 charges of reversion. That's really the big. That's almost like a capstone for M+ is getting 2 charges of reversion, because in raid you're not as worried about like using Living Flame on cooldown for damage or whatever, but in Mythic Plus, like sometimes you build up 2 charges of reversion, and that's going to give you a lot of flexibility to do other utility things and to go in and use Tail Swipe, and having 2 charges of that without losing throughput is going to be really, really
I also think that
so.
Time of Need in general is going to be, if procced, like if you're playing like really well, not in a pug, but like you're using this on a tank that is going to proc it on like a really hard pull, this could actually be like one of the few situations where you naturally go through Temporal Anomaly, buffing it in some way, and then having Time of Need as well. Like, just imagine like you spawn a little dude that's just gonna like bomb your tank for like in some giant pull as like a help for him. I think that could be really good.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you could also the build with the way things are now, I didn't go Temporal Anomaly, and then unfortunately I can't get Timekeeper. But I think the build that I would like to play if it was tuned properly was get rid of all the green stuff on the left in terms of Emerald Communion, Lifebind, and Grove Tender, and then instead go down the far right side from Temporal Anomaly. You get the instant cast, because it's actually pretty fun when it's instant cast. Then you go Time of Need, and then you go Timekeeper, and then that should be like somewhere near the end.
I think that looks really good for dungeons. If it was
that's
tuned
ideal,
properly.
and that's what I had set up. But Temporal Anomaly is just such like a weird spell right now that it costs so much mana, and it like, I don't know. It could be good though. It could be really, really good.
All right, cool. All right, we are probably near the end of this. I just any final thoughts from you guys about this spec that if
I'm
like
gonna wrap real quick.
Okay, oh shit, spit maybe.
All right, hover should affect empowered spells. Maybe that would be really cool if it did. Casting empowered spells while moving would be cool. It'd be lit.
Yes.
Detonate global cooldown on power spells. Bad. Get rid of it. Right now you're able to bypass it by mashing a button while you're detonating the empower spell. It doesn't feel good to have to pay 2 globals for an empower spell. 25 yard range. Bad. Maybe make it like 30, 35 for healers. Let's see. Delete Call of Ysera or make it not rescue tied. In theory, it's a cool talent, but having it tied to rescue, again, like we talked about earlier, movement skills tied to healing increase. Bad. 3-point nodes near capstone. Bad. Make them 2 points. You get more flexibility. That's cool. talent that impacts the versatility of Rewind is probably a bit too low in the tree in terms of like you need to spend a lot of points to get down to it.
Definitely true. This should be a tangent from time dilation, right?
Probably,
or from Rewind.
From Rewind itself, yeah. And then also, Lifebind has the same thing that Call of Ysera has, where it's tied to Rescue. There's a lot of things tied to Rescue. I don't like them being tied to a movement skill. If it's not meant to be a movement skill, then I don't know. It seems like it's meant to be a movement skill.
You're going to be casting a lot, so having an ability that allows you to reposition easily is really important.
It seems necessary.
You having to use a healer, having to use your basically only insanely, well, I mean, you have hover, but like, you know, like your other
if hover impacted empowered spells, I could see Rescue not necessarily always being a movement skill and being a healing amp.
I think it's bad. Okay, I think it's like kind of objectively bad. Like I think like it makes sense why sometimes in like a DPS build that like movement skills help you heal. The fact ever thinking that the correct thing to do on a healer evoker is to press Rescue on cooldown for throughput is bad. That is just not a good use of that button. It's such a good button. It should not be for that.
Oh, and one last thing. Haste, please let it impact empower spells. I get that there's the temporal compression thing that already kind of does that, but I don't know. Empower skills just feel really weird that they're not haste scaled, but like the rest of the class likes haste, so...
Empower needs massive work for both specs, which we're about to get into the DPS specs in a second. Casting, like having hover affect them is an option. Having haste affect their cast speed is an option. Having their cast speed not affected by haste but just faster. Having it like look and feel cooler that you're doing them. Like just an example on just fire breath on my guy here in whatever zone I'm in is like when you press it, like nothing changes other than like it going through the ticks on your health bar, right? Like it just shows it like this. There's nothing. Your guy doesn't even do anything different. You could easily make it like, you know, have some kind of animation pop up on your screen or on your character when it's passing different thresholds, so it's easier to track and also just feels better to hold it for that long. There's a lot of things they could do to make that make a lot more sense.
Maybe hover can be casted while hover while casting spells, like kind of like
Shimmer.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. That would probably break.
It's already
the power level.
Such a good button.
Yeah,
I mean, it's so good.
But like, imagine you're casting a power spell. You're like halfway through it. And you need to move, but like now you need to hover. So it's like, well, but you know, maybe if hover affected in power spells, you could then cast your power spell while you're moving, while you're mid cast.
Yeah,
but that probably seems too good. But that's like my maybe.
And those are all things to look at, which is very good to have those be like concise. There are a lot of very good things, though. The fact that there's like two very viable builds that play differently in like a raid environment are nice. The capstones are all.
I love the playstyle class.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's really big brain. It seems like it's a pretty hard class to play too. I think like play really well, but the also like the bottom capstones are all like really high power level. You could realistically take all three. You'd love to see that. Very few classes actually have that. The class tree has like a ton of choice. It's really good. You have anything, Growl and Driney? Anything you'd like to say?
I feel like I agree with a lot of the stuff Maevy said. The only thing I worry about is I feel already very spoiled with this class, so it's hard to ask for more and like more flexibility. You know what I mean? Like make cover better, make empowered spells better. I do agree that the raid playstyle is going to feel really annoying if the best way to get HPS is to spam these empowered spells 4 every 15 seconds, like you said, and that like
it's going to feel horrific.
Imagine 4 3-second casts every 15 seconds. Like that's like
with
what?
the Echo build, you temporal compress them down to like 2.5 second casts. So it's not as bad, but it's still like you pretty much only temporal compress 1 out of your 3 because you just don't have enough essence to spend enough echoes to get enough temporal compressions to get the cast time down.
Yeah, I love the class. I think I agree with all of his improvements, although asking for improvements with already so many cool things is a little bit worrying. The only thing I'll say is I really have to play the 25-yard range because I'm telling you, man, like think about dispels. Like imagine how important some dispels are and how fast you need to be and how coordinated, and the fact that like imagine, okay, someone in your raid has a debuff or your M+ has a debuff. You literally need to find them and like hover over to them to get to them just so you can dispel, and it's going to be, I don't know. I don't know how I would make it work. Like if somehow like give the tank external and like the dispel and like some buttons 40 yards, but not, yeah. You know, like I don't know how I would do it because that would also be really clunky, right? Like how would you have your frame set up to show when people are out of range or whatever? So I just really am really excited to play it, but it's hard to know exactly how these things are going to play out.
You're
when you
you're
can't play it.
definitely yeah. As far as the actual gameplay is concerned, you're definitely like dungeons just need to be available first thing. Could be as early as Tuesday as well. They're releasing they're releasing new zones every week, right? So I mean like there's that, and then you assume that they'll add dungeons like probably a class tree a week at some point. If that's the case, then you'll get an idea to see that. But yeah, definitely need to play with it in real content. Like some people, like we've done like Shadowlands, Mythic Zeros, and stuff. But like you're not going to get the full idea
It's not. It's
until
not
you
what
do
we're doing
challenging
here.
content for sure. All right, so I think we're pretty much good. Thanks for coming on, guys. I think we're gonna
Thanks for having us.
move on to damage. Yeah, thank you,
Thanks
especially
for giving me my soapbox to spit off of.
yeah.
All right,
No,
wake everyone up now that the healer talk is done.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Wake
Wake
up.
up. Healers are gone. I'm gonna let chat know too because we're in ads. All right, yeah. If you guys could just drop the call and then I'll at them to join.
Well,
Sure.
GG's.
Adios.
If you guys want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourself, starting with Kalamazi. Is that saying your name right, by the way?
Dude, it is. It
Okay,
is.
I've been so like
know.
stun locked by your name because I called you something different, but then I started calling you it again because I thought it was the other one that you told me it wasn't. I called you Kalamazi or something.
I mean, I've known you for like 2 years. I hugged you during the first win
yeah,
like,
yeah.
years ago. We hung out in Boston. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, okay, you're making me feel bad, but that's okay. Okay, yeah, no, I need to. I also need to. Chat is reminding me that I need to update your all's names. I also think Trill's gonna be here. He said he's gonna be here, but I know they got done playing not too long ago, but that's fine. All right, Goop. Tell the stream about you.
Huh? Hello. What's up?
All right, that's him. And then we have Preheat here as well.
Hello, I'm Preheat. I'm the Wowhead Guide Writer for Fire and Frost Mage, and I play a lot of Evoker, and I plan to play a lot of it too.
Let's go. All right, I need to turn Goop up too. You're super quiet.
I'm the guy who hugged Max multiple times, and yeah, name's pronounced Kalamazi, but
Amen.
My phone corrects it to Kalamazi every time.
Does it actually? I get calamari a lot. That'll
Okay.
actually make it even worse for him.
All right, so we're gonna talk about the spec tree. We already have covered a lot of like the class-based stuff, so we will kind of go through a tree here. I've actually played a bit more of Devastation, so I'll have a lot more input, but I know you guys have all as well, and that'll probably see itself a lot more in the actual spec tree for sure, because that's like where it's very interesting to see where they want to go with a few of these builds. Currently, it seems like they have blue kind of being like a really single target oriented build, but also Living Flame just does way too much damage. So it's like, yeah, the red doesn't really feel right. Firestorm should be like an insane AoE talent. It's not really that strong. You know, the Fire Breath extending feels weird and bad, and Empower abilities are pretty problematic, all that stuff. We'll get there. Just for now, let's go through the class tree right after you guys kind of give your initial impressions on playing the spec and all the tools it has available. Anyone can go.
Yeah, so the playstyle, it seems like, for red and blue, both super solid in AoE, single target, everything else. Initially, like, we were playing around with it. We were trying to get a feel for what the tuning would be like, even though it's like pretty early. And I'd say the tuning seems pretty good. You can also play like kind of hybrid builds, kind of spanning the gap between blue and red, especially with like Everburning Flame. It's weird to extend that in like AoE, and it feels a lot like Fire Mage in a lot of situations where you're like, I just want to get my dot out and enemies aren't living long enough. But I will say that a lot of these like blue traits kind of feel like they almost are meant to work with these red traits as well. So I feel like the intention is almost that you can just kind of play whatever, and it seems like they've kind of pulled that off. So really
Yeah.
good first impression from all this.
Cool.
Yeah, I feel like after playing both, we played a bit of a hybrid build. We were running some dungeons like I think Zero Shadowland stuff a bit ago together. Like, I feel like there's potential there with the fire build, but like Max said, like Firestorm and Snapfire just feel underwhelming. Like there's a couple of talents with fire being Feed the Flames and
Doesn't work
Leaping
currently.
Flames, which are they're just not working. They're just bugged, which like sort of devalues Fire's AoE profile. But yeah, like he touched a bit on Everburning Flame. Like it seems odd. Like Fire seems like it's more suited around this like sustained heavy AoE profile where like packs live for a long time. Sort of how like Destro is, right? Where like a Destro lock is not going to run into a pack and burst to a million DPS like a Windwalker or a Survival Hunter, right? But if things live for a while, their damage ramps, and that's where their synergy grows, right? Blue is more of like a, at least to me, sort of feels like a, you can go in and just blast things down quickly with like Eternity Surges and Charge Bolts, Cleaving. Yeah, like I think they're both similar and different, both good in single target at times, but just have like these sort of like different filler roles they fill. I don't know. That's sort of how I feel about it, at least.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely get into the spec tree a little bit more. Let's talk about so how we're gonna do the class tree is we're gonna just go down and make sure that we have all the stuff that's like basically required for, you know, playing the game properly and having, you know, just like leave out some of the optional stuff, take as much as we need of very obvious things that you have to go forward, and then we will move on from that and then talk about the option nodes we have in like most environments. So at the beginning, we're going to focus primarily as like a raid range DPS, not Mythic Plus as much for the class tree. So obviously, I don't know if anyone wants specifically to walk me down, but it is I'm also a little bit, well, like at the beginning, you're basically required to just like, you know, you're getting the slow, you're getting the living flame, you're getting disintegrate, you're getting essence, and then now what? You need like one more point to move on. Everything here is optional, right? Technically, including your kick, although you're obviously going to get the magic damage node under it. So anyone from here wants to take it, that is just fine. And obviously, we'll talk about stuff we could take up hero again.
I don't think you're required to take the slow at all. I actually think you'd rather take something else most of the time.
Correct. Yeah, no. The slow is just because in most builds I end up like teching into the lower cooldown personal, and that's like required to get to that point, right? And also, don't you need that to get the living flame damage as well?
I think I'd rather
have rescue.
Take rescue. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's something where I think, especially with it not being a like throughput button, something you'd probably do later in the tree and something you do that. So for now, I think as long as you're not going to commit two things for the poison dispel just to get rescue. I mean, rescue's fucking insane. I don't disagree with you, but we'll talk about swapping that later when we see how many points we have. So moving on down from just this as a base, like try not to think of this as like I already have this fully worked out in my head and I'm looking at my tree. Think of like every decision you're making in the moment, and then we'll get down, take all the obvious and good decisions that you would have for like raid, and then you'd go up here and be like, you know what, on most fights this personal especially is like really, really weak, and you have like a really strong personal down here. Like you'd actually just prefer to have rescue on so many encounters that you would just take the slow, not consider the movement reduction, and then you just add the point somewhere else. So that's fine. So tip the scales and magic damage done increase. Preheat, where are we going from here?
Yeah, so those are both basically, you're going to take those for sure. From there, I mean, so if you like your healers, you can take Source of Magic. Depends on how you feel about them. But I like taking that one because Fly With Me is fantastic. It's probably like the best ability they've ever added to this game. But I did want to like double back on one that we kind of skipped over that I feel like is so insane that we have to talk about. So Cauterizing Flame is probably one of the most goated talents ever. It's literally a 1 minute cooldown, and it's a Kyrian pot that you can do on an ally. And like that's just so insane to have as a DPS, I feel like.
Correct. The only reason I didn't do it right away is that there are definitely going to be fights where this has zero use, and it's probably a tech pick that you do later, although it has an extremely high power level. Yeah.
But anyways, going down from there, I mean, you know, on the same row, we obviously have like the Fire Breath's instant damage increase, which is probably pretty good. Protracted.
Before we talk about anything else, you mentioned Source of Magic. So when like talking about a raid build, it's kind of hard to tell how many Evokers are going to be in the raid right now. I actually don't think there's going to be many classes in this game that are stacked, especially knowing that like last expansion you had outside of raid buffs like 13 to 12 classes if there was a DK grip on a fight that were basically you could fill in based on the power level of every class currently outside of required things. Now that number is down to like kind of like 8 and 7 and potentially even less when more class trees get released. So I don't know how often stacking is going to be. The reason why I'm saying this is unless you're having a ton of Evokers, I'm pretty sure you're always taking Source of Magic. Currently, its power level is like very high, much higher for healers than DPS, by the way, especially if you're only playing red build. It's a little bit better as blue build. But this is definitely like insanely fucking good. But we can actually leave it for now. I actually agree with that thought process. I think also if you guys have played it, I mean, hover lasting 4 seconds longer is like
that's
money back guarantee requirement. Yeah.
Yep. Hover is so broken, man.
Yeah.
Like, also, in dungeons especially, that fly with me talent below the Twin Guardian, absolutely insane. Like the biggest absorb shields.
Oh yeah, see that's
Such a
why
fantastic button.
like initially when I had an issue with their main personal kind of sucking really bad, I was thinking that like even in the worst case scenario, renewing Blaze, even as a 1 point being a 1.5 and not reducing it is so strong. But then also the fact that you could use Fly with Me and the Twin Guardian point is just a 1 minute personal even just for yourself, and that's like enough to deal with like a lot of things in raid fights. But you mentioned that you would go down to get Source of Magic just to get to this. Assuming that you want the tech into getting Renewing Blaze, you would probably just grab Ancient Flame in general.
Ancient Flame, yeah.
So then now we need another, before we start teching out our last points, we need another 4 points to continue down the tree. And there's a lot of options for this, right? So obviously 3 of those 4 points could be just grabbing Source of Magic, grabbing extra health. That could be pretty fight specific. On a kick encounter where you're grabbing Quell, where you're like quelling every 20 seconds to get an essence that'll have like decently high value, one of the few throughput value options you can have in the tree. Obviously Cauterizing Flame, obviously Rescue, and then also repathing this and getting rid of the slow or teching into the slower personal. One thing I did want to point out that did feel bad in other trees and does in this tree as well is I feel like Recall is never ever going to get selected. You would just play around that, and I wonder if they could maybe make this baseline, because you just never every point you could choose right now is actually cracked, and this is just like whatever. So I would like to have that just be baseline on breath, because it would just make the gameplay feel a little bit better because you won't select it.
It also just feels kind of slow to use.
It-
when you tell
yeah,
it into it. I'd rather just walk.
Yeah.
I think that trade is cringe because it's a whole GCD you have to wait afterwards. Like I don't know why
Yeah.
it isn't off the GCD. And I think until they like put it back on the GCD, I would only choose it in situations where like I'd really want to, like where I'd feel really dangerous going in like that.
Okay.
That is-
Yeah. Good.
I just like more often than not you can play your actual like deep breath. We don't really even need recall more often than not. But that's it.
Yeah. So we do have to just select something here. Rescue's like pretty fucking crazy. So I'm thinking maybe for now we just do expunge, rescue, get rid of permeating chill, and then we still have the 3 points to spend, and I think we just put that directly into tempered scale and source of magic. So now we have the bottom thing unlocked with the exact things and still have some points we can tech out later over here. This is actually interesting. So the only like technical damage option on the way down outside of a very niche situation where Unravel is like very strong and just very rare in PvE. This is like the damage option, but this is also just very good tech. So like basically on any, this is like raid situation, probably not of a lot of Azure Strike value, where it's damaging an additional enemy and you can certainly select it, but I think it's just a choice node between these two things. You're going to grab Fly with Me, right? I think you hold on Twin Guardian for now, grab the Hover additional charge, and now Leaping Flames is a guarantee. So we were talking about this a little earlier too. So even in a scenario where another technical option you can get for damage is if you're doing like a single target fight, and you cast this. Currently, this like tooltip doesn't work properly for people who are watching. It doesn't. You have to cast it directly after Fire Breath to get it to work every time, I believe. And instead of it just being like a buff for 20 seconds, that just makes it so the next Living Flame you cast, or just have it being part of your built-in kit. So it doesn't work quite properly according to the tooltip. But if you hit one boss and there aren't other classes around them, or there aren't like other mobs around them, it will heal with the other
that's
power
cool.
levels, which is interesting because if you look at Scarlet Adaptation, it also technically gives you damage in that way as well. So this is like an extra point to think about later. But Goop, where would you go from here just on a generic raid build? What are the things you're considering?
Generic raid build? I mean, if there's not really anything for damage, you're just gonna go into these like utility choices. Like you can take the shielding on yourself on Twin Guardian so that you can get down to that party cooldown, or you could take Scarlet Adaptation up top, like you said. I think Renewing Blaze is just really powerful.
I think you need
as a
Renewing
personal.
Blaze. Like I think in all of our conversations I've had, Renewing Blaze kind of seems like a tech pick, and I guess technically there is fights where it's really not that dangerous for you, but I mean this is just one of the very best like personal cooldowns in the game that isn't a damage reduction, and your damage reduction cooldown kind of stinks. So I think this is like a guarantee.
I mean, anything that isn't gonna kill you is just completely negated by this, right? That's kind of broken.
Yeah.
I guess theoretically that's true, yeah.
What's up?
No, I didn't think about it like that. I guess essentially what he said, anything that's not going to kill you is essentially negated by this. It's a, 14-second duration? I mean,
Kind of.
I guess sort of, yeah. It depends a bit. 'Cause, like that actual heal comes over 14 seconds. It's like
So
staggered.
Yeah, I'm a little biased against it just because it seems like just the worst alter time to me. But I mean, alter time is extremely strong. So
I mean, Elder Time is better ability than like almost any in the class in the game has. Even
This
if
is
you
true.
don't even count the movement thing, just healing. But like if you just look at this at a 1.5 minute cooldown, so let's just picture you pop this and then you go from 100% to 1%. You take exactly 99% of your damage. Just to like visualize it, you would be just over 50% of your health at the end of that 8 seconds from the hot, and then 6 seconds after this is off of you, you would just be healing for up to 90%, right? Or up to 100% again. So like it's not like it's super delayed. Like you're getting basically half the value within the time you're taking it. It's extremely powerful. What is it? So how do you guys feel about Time Spiral? We talked about this a little bit with other classes, but I actually wonder if you guys have thought about this ability a lot.
yeah, so Time Spiral definitely seems like really nice for solo play, even because if you like hover twice and use it again, hover just like rolls the duration that you get castle moving into like a big duration, which is really nice. So I like it just for personal play, but I think for the group, I mean, I could see situations where like it could be, useful in like a raid setting, but it's also like movement, right? So you can just kind of play around movement in most cases. But I mean, there's definitely going to be cases where you want that, I think.
What do you guys think about Time Spiral?
Time Spiral,
Specifically,
which
yeah.
is my game just crashed. What does Time Spiral do again? I know the names. I know the abilities.
Yeah, it's a 2-minute cooldown that allows your entire raid to use an extra major movement ability
Oh,
one time.
got it. I was looking at Zephyr. I don't know. I think it's okay. I think it's pretty situational. Like at
Yeah.
times it can be pretty wild, but I don't think like I feel like I don't want to get too far into like general Evoker stuff. I feel like some of their like raid utilities been a bit overvalued. Personally, I think Time Spiral is sort of one of those. It's fine. It can be situationally pretty good, but I feel like more often than not, it might be just a bit overvalued.
Yeah, and also for Warlock, it's literally just your demonic circle, so...
Yeah, well, it's better for some classes and worse for others, but I mean,
Yeah.
like...
Yeah, so I have a list actually. Yeah, so like basically classes it's good for is getting an extra stack of Horse for a Paladin is nuts. Getting an extra Fell Rush for a DH outside of Momentum is kind of whatever. Druid getting an extra use of Dash could be good. Blink and Shimmer obviously good. Roll good. Leap of Faith actually, even though they don't have a movement skill, it's actually like pretty solid that you could grip someone 2 times in 10 seconds. You could potentially do something with that. Sprints, whatever. Shamans actually get Spirit Walker's Grace, Resto and LA Shamans.
Yeah, that's insane.
So like being able to give your healers and DPS the ability to DPS while moving as an on use is very strong. Personal Point, literally irrelevant. Death's Advance depends on the fight. Again, Heroic Leap, irrelevant. Aspect of the Cheetah, good. So that's like half and half good. But then I just want to like kind of, this is what I was thinking about earlier, man. Hover is so fucking unbelievable that, and I'm pretty sure the only thing that even comes close to it in the entire game is actually Shimmer. But dude, even just using this on a 2-minute cooldown to allow yourself in a pinch to give you yourself and no one else an extra hover is good.
Yeah,
And
also to like add on to that, imagine this ability on a fight like Zymox back in Castle Nathria, right? Like if you had one of those for every bomb set, it would just, there's just so much more freedom in like getting that stuff done.
yeah,
So
that's a really good
true.
example.
we're also like losing Soul Shape and we're losing Door of Shadows as well. So I feel like people might be undervaluing their own mobility right now just a little bit because it's a little carried by the Covenant abilities. So just another thing to think about.
Yeah, also something that makes movement matter a little bit less is the fact that they gave shamans more raid buffs, making them more prevalent and potentially available in raids for win rushes. And the fact that now every druid that you saw last expansion that brought roar now can bring twice as many roars per druid. So that's like speed will matter a little bit less. But I really doubt, like, there's going to be scenarios where you like Time Spiral to do a specific mechanic, but I really think even as a personal, this is like a very, very powerful ability to consider. And I would probably select it most times. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. Again, we're talking about raid. I think you're just going to make use of it. So now we are down to 3 points. What do you guys think are the strongest considerations for these points in a raid environment?
It's just all situational, right?
Yeah,
like cauterizing flame. If there's a bleed, a 1-minute bleed dispels, like so. There's just nothing else like that, right? It's the only thing that can do that other than Bop, which is a 5-minute cooldown, I think.
Mm-hmm. And there's very few classes too that aren't healers that can do anything close to this too.
I also think you lock in Tailwind to the left of it as well because
Really?
yeah, because the movement speed you get from that is really, really nice. It almost makes into it like a dash as well, like a really, really strong dash. So I'm a big fan of this talent, and especially if you're taking Time Anomaly or whatever it's called at the very bottom, which I like that button so much that I'm always going to keep it so I can press it, or Time Spiral is what I meant. So yeah, that just gives me like way more mobility.
Dude, I really think you're going like you'd have to like see Warcraft logs or whatever, but like I feel like Scarlet Adaptation might increase your damage done in a single target scenario by like maybe like 1% or something. And if that's true, like people are just going to take this, but we'll kind of just leave that for now. Just now knowing the interaction with Leaping Flames. But yeah, just to kind of go over some of the options that you have to choose. Unravel. Imagine Unravel as tech on like Sun King, right?
Yeah,
like,
or the sausage, right?
It's
Especially
actually
like
huge.
it's really
like you
really
can
good.
like I think the shield on Sun King was 6 seconds, right? The 6-second cast, but
think
like
it was, yeah.
anytime if it's like a 10-second shield, you have a 9-second cooldown here. It's gonna hit for 5% of your spell power coefficient. That's insane. And the fact that like, well, I don't know, they'd probably talent into it just for this one fight, but like healers would probably take it too, right? Because the damage is just way too high.
It's it's extremely powerful, and it's like not out of your way to get it. That's something this tree has done so well, is it presents every single option with your default build, both in Resto and like the DPS version of this, where you are able to get basically whatever you want and you don't have to go to it. Like Cauterizing Flame, you're probably gonna have on most raid fights. I agree, but then 1 point away from that is like basically like a permanent CC if you need it, or Scarlet Adaptation, or a shorter cooldown Renewing Blaze based on the fight. Right, something that I feel like I don't like that you don't take right now. If you're just talking about tech, the only like real criticism I have, and I don't think it's that big, is the healing done and healing received node is in the way of getting Bountiful Bloom, and I feel like Bountiful Bloom as a DPS evoker actually is like pretty fucking good tech for like off healing on some fights. Like that ability is good.
Yeah.
Emerald Blossom, like that is like one of the better off healing abilities, single GCD things that I think is it the singular best one of like any like hybrid ranged like healer guy.
It probably is. I don't think
Yeah.
what else would even be better. It's a half
It's
minute
literally
cooldown.
it's literally just wild growth without
Yeah, it's
any
wild growth.
downsides. And we were using it like in dungeons, and it's hilarious with all evokers. Everyone just drops it, hold 5
Yeah.
people, just boom, lay on hands.
Yeah, and again, still, if you like took that, you could tech it into like if it was in a better spot in the tree. I really doubt you'll ever take this because of the points required to get it. But like it would also just like feed into Scarlet Adaptation's value as well, which you don't even have to think about. It would just give you damage.
And there's enough points to take it sometimes. Like we have a lot of stuff that
There could
like,
be.
selected that we could just unselect
Yeah.
to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Like what if you don't need that healer mana thing? I forget the name. Like what if you don't need the reduced magic damage taken? Like that's 3 points. There's plenty of like really good stuff, but it's not 100% necessary in every type of fight where you could easily just tech into stronger off healing.
Yeah, also like if you end up not needing certain abilities for a certain raid encounter, just picking up the Draconic Legacy, those 2 points, it's just 4% more health, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. And being able to just add health, like there won't be a lot of fights like that. Like imagine you're like progressing Castle Nathria, right? And you're doing like Council, doesn't really matter. Like it's a hard healing fight, but it doesn't really matter. Same thing with Zymox and Nerva. But then you get to Sludge Fist, and it's like, okay, like 4 times in this fight, everyone in the raid gets hit to like some number between like dead or 10%. So like every bit of health is noticeably better. It's very fight techy kind of situation. But overall, I think this tree is one of the more well-made trees that they've done, specifically class, because they have it easy for every spec to get their throughput options. And then they basically just leave you a variety of points to tech out into exactly what you want, and you don't feel forced into taking any of it. There are a lot of specs that exist currently. If you look at this calculator where they spend basically, I mean, I'll use DKs for example. It's getting reworked a little bit, but I don't think this problem's going to be solved, where they basically are spending like every single point on throughput in this tree, and they're trying to get as much as they can on the way, and there's some abilities they might never pick because there's just too much good shit. I feel like some of the better trees, and as your all's main classes, I think every single one of your main classes except for Goops has actually not been released yet, where you'll see that, you know, I think as they're being made more, they're much more mindful of that. So it's really good.
It also seems to me a difference between like hybrid tree versus like a pure DPS tree. They just put a lot more DPS in like a hunter or like probably a mage in their general tree than you're ever going to be able to put in a tree that has 2-3 roles. Druid 4 roles, right?
Definitely.
Mhm.
But I think it's something they should try to emulate. In fact, you mentioned hunters, right? Like hunters, the hunter guy actually did that, and it may not have even been his choice because, as with every single person who's making these trees, sometimes your player base is totally different than other player bases, right? Like some people are the class designer for shaman, and then someone's a hunter. But it turns out that shaman doesn't have, like hunter has, hundreds of thousands of people who probably never step into a raid, and all they care about are these nodes where their pet heals for more and can be dispelled and takes less damage, and they can just do solo content they've never done before. It's like the hunter tree actually has almost the entire first 2 parts of the tree is just tech for like things that aren't damage related whatsoever, and all the damage at the bottom to make up for that. But I think you bring up a really strong point where it is much easier to have this happen in your design process when making something like a class that has 3 DPS slots. I just think it's something that especially these people that are coming out soon for mage and warlock are really mindful of that they don't make you spend your entire class tree into getting damage. And the Evoker tree is a perfect example of this. All right, so moving on. I was gonna say we don't even really need to talk about it, but I was gonna say we could like build this tree for Mythic Plus too. But it's kind of the same shit. Like you don't.
Sort of situational still too, right?
It's all just 5 points at the end being situational to fill a specific niche, and they have extremely strong party synergy. So yeah, I mean
That's a good thing. I think it's like a good example of like a tree being just like built properly, like in a good way. Like you have those floater traits, but you hit on what you need mostly, right? You have like Fly With Me, you have like your Twin Guardian baseline, but you have the option of taking like Cauterizing Flame or other ones in certain dungeons. It's solid. Like I agree, the tree's really well rounded. It's been fun to mess with.
Yeah, I think also, I don't know if this has been mentioned yet, but like overall, which is below Oppressing Roar, is just going to be like you pick that in Raging Week's like non-negotiable, I'm pretty sure.
There's also supposed to be some dungeons that have enrages in as well, and one thing we talked about this during the healer tree is it also just like is going to have a really short cooldown too by interacting with things that are actually being enraged. Not to mention that, I mean, we didn't really talk about Oppressing Roar, but it's
insane.
Definitely fucking insane. Like
imagine that like on Anduin, like add CC, like isn't that like massive there, right? Like,
yeah, the thing that I think of with this, which probably might get it nerfed, is that like I'm thinking of like PvP and someone being in an 8-second kidney shot, but the but like outside, we never talk about PvP on my stream because I just don't really care about it much. But like in PvE, even just on a 2-minute cooldown to make your initial stun on the pull last 50% longer is very good. So like yeah, this is a definitely an underrated ability. Is it a 12-second kidney? Or no, it's 9-second, right? It's not double the duration. It's 50% more. Yeah, 9.
It can be 10.5, actually.
Oh, what's up, Trill?
Jeez.
So Trill just joined. Everyone knows who you are, so probably no need to introduce yourself. Yeah, actually, that's a quick. Have you thought about this class in PvP at all? Not to like give like a huge tangent, but like, what do you think about its power level now that you've played around with it a bit?
The 25-year range is probably gonna be the biggest like hurdle, I guess you could say. Like especially for healing. Like obviously healers want to be very far away most of the time. And I mean there are definitely some really insane things that I'd say about it. Like for example, obviously pressing war is gonna be crazy, but there's a PvP talent that makes you immune to all
time
like
stop.
silence and interrupts.
Yep.
When you pop into Obsidian Scales, and then yeah, obviously time stop. But Chrono Loop's like almost like an NS Cyclone. Like if you have no more CC, you just Chrono Loop somebody, and then if you weren't gonna kill them anyway, and then you can like continue the CC chain and.
So you think
that way,
you think like 25-yard range probably won't affect DPS Evoker and Arena nearly as much as
yeah,
healing.
I think the healing will be very weird with only 25-yard range.
I think they'll look at that though, because I think that's like something we haven't played a lot with it in PvP, but it's something that could be weird. But anyways, we're gonna move on to the spec tree. So this is a tree that I think is a little problematic. I like the way that it's spread out into like blue and red almost down the middle. A very good cooldown. We didn't get a chance to talk about Dragon Rage earlier, but it's actually one of my favorite cooldowns in the entire game. I feel like it perfectly captures the thing that they tried to do 2 years ago, where they wanted every single cooldown to be on the GCD, but it just felt terrible because none of them really did enough to make sense of it. And Dragon Rage does it perfectly, right? So it is on the GCD, but it doesn't feel bad because you just lob pyres at 3 enemies, and it's just like, okay, you're popping off. So it on the GCD is totally fine. And yeah, I think that's really cool. I think the capstone nodes are definitely interesting. The right two are definitely, in my opinion, much better than the left one, at least in terms of design. But yeah, you guys can kind of just as a group, if you want, kind of take me down the build for now. Let's talk about.
Can I talk about Dragon Rage actually?
Yeah, actually, go for it.
I think it actually feels really, really underwhelming on single target, and especially if you don't take Azure Essence
Ruin.
Burst. Well, Ruin, yeah, too. But if you don't take Azure Essence Burst, you don't really have a great way of like proccing it. You have to like hard cast or Living Flame to actually proc the Essence Burst. So you kind of need that talent to even get much value out of it at all. Otherwise, it's just a few instant pyres and that's it. Like
it seems really odd. Like even like if I'm playing like more of a fire build, like an AOE, and I pop Dragon's Rage, like I know that like both the cleave talents for Living Flame aren't working right now, but it feels like when I'm casting a Living Flame in like heavy AOE under a Dragon's Rage, like to get those instant cast pyre procs, I'd rather just be throwing Azure Strikes, like instant cast in the instant cast. I'm losing so much value like by just losing like multiple pyres for that rage cast, you know. I agree. It feels really awkward in certain scenarios.
Yeah, I think in
it's
Dragon
almost
Rage,
useless in single target. Like
I think in Dragon Rage, you're pretty much just clawing with that talent. Like it just feels like how you got to play it. But I will say with the Ruin talent, it's kind of further on. But like having that mastery be full effect while you have the cooldown up, I could definitely see situations where like depending on the build, and we'll talk more about this once we like talk about red, like deep red stuff. But I could see you using it just for the mastery effects, like especially when the boss is like lower, and then doing like your normal DPS rotation that may not even necessarily depend on getting essence return.
Definitely, and I think
weird.
I do really like the idea of Ruin, and honestly, if Ruin didn't exist, the mastery for this class would feel really bad. And I guess we can kind of talk about the mastery. I think it's going to potentially be like one of the hardest things to understand how good a class is in the entire game, because their mastery is absolute sim bait. Because every person that like makes a decision on like what a class is good, almost all of them just look at 5-minute single target sims. Obviously, it's a big problem, but that's definitely what happens. And this class is always going to sim better than it's going to do at like a later stage in the fight. Just in terms of like fights where, outside of the niche thing like Sylvanas, where having that mastery at the beginning is actually like on any hard mythic boss is not really relevant, even though it makes you good for target switching. What do you guys think about the mastery?
I think it's fine because Ruin exists. I think, well, not just Ruin, but the capstone below it, Tyranny, just basically kindling for this class. You can already get this 2-minute cooldown with like no haste on these template characters down to like a minute 20, a minute 15. Like imagine in a raid scenario where you have gear, where you have haste, which I think this class needs a lot. I don't know if you guys agree, but haste,
I think so.
Yeah,
I think
the haste makes it feel
is
really
going to
good.
be the number one stat to stack. You're getting this down to a minute already with haste, I think, potentially even lower. And it lasts 20 seconds. Like, I don't think Mastery is going to be that bad at all.
Oh, Goop, to add on to that, one of the talents that's kind of key to this conversation as well isn't working right now. Feed the Flames is the one that gives cooldown reduction on Fire Breath. And since Fire Breath has cooldown reduction on your main ability, once that's working, it's going to be even better.
Definitely. What is the other thing I wanted to ask as well? Actually, no, let's just go into who wants to take me down if you were to just focus. So there's obviously like a lot of hybrid builds right now. There's also a full blue and a full red. We can kind of talk about the abilities as we get through them. One thing that was definitely very noticeable, and we will talk about this too in the healer tree, is how weird the empowers feel. The fact that you can't cast them all hover, the fact that they are not made faster by haste, the fact that, to get a level 1, you can't just like tap it, and also that they're kind of boring across the entire class. Like especially something like Eternity Surge, right? Like just holding it longer to deal damage to more enemies, like that doesn't feel awesome at all. Like I feel like they could kind of rework their whole philosophy around like how Empower is going to work for this class.
It also sort of feels weird. Like I don't want to get too far like off course.
No, you're fine. This is
but,
very
like,
informal.
Like with Eternity Surge, like whether you take like the 4th tier of Empowered, like hitting 1 to 4 enemies, like there's that weird middle ground where it's like the Power Swell talent, the one that gives you 50% increased essence regen. There's that weird like middle ground where like if you're in single target, I think both Preheat and I have like sort of discovered you still want to fully empower that in single target, but like you're not getting any kind of damage increase. It's just a 6-second extension of your Power Swell buff.
Just because of Power Swell? That's really lame.
Can I go into like a big rant about Power Swell, because I feel like this is important for this.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So any ability that takes I feel like Power Swell is one of those talents where you're probably going to take it regardless of whatever build, because there's no real way that's reliable to speed up your essence regeneration aside from this one talent. You may have like one-off things like, oh, you interrupt, or like, oh, it returns on on cast,
Right.
but this is we can kind of assume at this point that the design is probably like your damage at the end of the fight is a factor of how much Empower you or how much essence you used, right? So this heavily incentivizes, like Kalamazi is saying, fully charging your Empower abilities, but it also heavily incentivizes talents like Fauna Magic to increase your Empower level, and also spells like Eternity Surge, which is just another way to generate Power Swell, and obviously like Tyranny, which we were already talking about, which you get from like fully charging up. And I think something like Tyranny giving you cooldown reduction and like incentivizing fully charging all the time is fine, because that's like a capstone, and that totally makes sense for it to impact the gameplay. But I feel like having Power Swell as like a staple may be incentivizing us to kind of ignore their new system and just like full send. Obviously we'll need to like see actual data to like know if it's correct to like full charge or not in like every situation, but it seems like if you're not going to cap on essence, it's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think like specifically right now, Living Flame is probably doing a little too much damage. Is that correct?
I mean, if you empower Living Flame like through the Fireside, it can be pretty wild. I was impressed with the damage it dealt.
Yeah.
Whether you're taking like Engulfing Blaze or Ruby Embers, like it can actually crank. And like Ever Burning Flame with Burnout and things like that, like there's a lot of synergy there. The fire build seems to be pretty simple, like in single target, but it just pipes. It just cranks. Like flame crushes.
Yeah, let's actually start with a fire build. So this is like the first thing I had an idea to do when I like went into Mythic Plus. I think there's definitely a huge Mythic Plus element of taking Eternity Surge and the Cleave Charge Blast. But like I was just like, I'm just gonna send full fire and see how it feels. So who's a fire lord who wants to take me down the fire road?
Kalamazi, do you want to do fire? I think you
I mean, sure. Like are we level 70 or what are we doing here?
Yeah, of course.
Like okay. All right, so I mean obviously like we're grabbing fire off the bat. Bang. Ruby Essence Burst right there. So like there's this weird like middle ground where, and the Preheat might be able to fill me in a bit here, like where when you get to the Disintegrate talent, Arcane Intensity, like I'm not sure, like I think at this point we're sort of at this weird point where like I'm not sure spending Pyre in single target is better than casting Disintegrate in single target, even if you're playing like an empowered fire build.
Yeah. So because Feed the Flames is bugged, you probably use it right now.
Yeah, let's
unbugged,
when we're talking about these builds, I think the best thing to do is just assume that things are bugged until this next Tuesday are not, right? Like definitely, and if things are like completely overtuned. Like I remember looking at a single target log yesterday of Trill doing, I'll pull it up on my stream right now. This was just you doing single target on a dummy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and Living Flame is 46% of your damage because he's not Azure striking for like in his Dragon Rage just for like the quick procs. He's just like slamming. Like that is right. Like that's no matter what, that is bad. That can't be right. So some of this stuff will obviously change.
Trill, quick question about that log. Were you trying to sack all your essence before you did Fire Breath so that you could just spam your Living Flame while you had
I would only just spam Living Flame until Burnout ran out.
Okay.
And I also was only doing one Empower and Eternity Surges.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, down the fire thing again. Here we go. So volatility, obviously.
2 in volatility, yeah. 1 in dense energy. And you need like 3 points to move on from this anyways. So like if we're skipping the arcane intensity part with Disintegrate, I think you just go Azure Essence Blast and like double A waste, because that'll get you Essence Attunement at some point anyways when you can backtrack. So like we unlock the next row now. Obviously grabbing Dragon Rage, it's wild. Double Ruby Affinity off to the left. You can grab Animosity too while you're there. It's fine. That's okay. And then like so you've got at least on my screen like I've got like 8 points left to spend. So I typically went like Imminent Destruction, the Empower like reduced cast time, and it gets like this weird thing when you're on the far left of like Engulfing Blaze and Ruby Embers, and like I'm not actually sure what's better here. I feel like Engulfing Blaze is better if you're playing Everburning Flame because of like the Ruby Embers like 3 times. It's hard to say. Like I've actually played both. So I just end up grabbing Engulfing Blaze as far as that's concerned. And then like if you're going like hard like big AoE build, I mean you Firestorm it up easily.
Yeah, so I think that's the issue. So Firestorm right now is like pretty ass, right? But
Yeah.
but like this is just a hard assumption that like especially seeing how this tree is built out where like it's like fire to the left and then blue to the right, where Charge Blast is like kind of like the opposite of Firestorm in a way, even though you can have Charge Blast cleave and it's pretty strong.
Right.
In any AoE situation, Blizzard would have made an error if you do not select Firestorm and Snapfire. That's clearly what it is designed for. So we're just going to assume in this fire build that Firestorm is correctly tuned where it is not at the moment.
I'd throw 1 point in Cascading Power, which is to the right of Firestorm, 1 in Quantum Magic. That's your 6 essences.
Got it.
And then what do we have left? 3.
You may want to get Essence Attunement up above.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, you grab Essence Attunement, which is off to the far right.
Yep, and then you have 2 more points.
Yep. Power Swell, obviously, 100%. And then you've got like the option of like Quell here, but I mean you've also got like Power Nexus, which is like your 6th essence, which is pretty big. So I'm just grabbing Power Nexus.
Okay.
And that should unlock the final row for you, right?
It does,
Yeah,
yep.
Or the next one, cool. So Snapfire, obviously, because we're assuming Firestorm's like giga damage.
Yep.
And you get in the Feed the Flames, which is bug, but it's pretty strong in an AoE based setting, this build, because like it's a super short fire breath time. Then it's like Heat Wave. Heat Wave's a weird one because like it's definitely worth it still, but it increases the dot duration of or the dot damage of Fire Blast or Fire Breath. It's not the actual like impact damage, or I guess like the explosion, but it's still worth it, I think. And then it sort of depends. Like I want to grab Ruin, obviously, and then how many points do you have left in your tree?
We have 5 total points, so you have the ability to get exactly Tyranny, Burnout, and Everburning if you wanted it, or I'm assuming you just want Tyranny, right? You're not Eternity Surging with this build, so it's a little bit less value, but you are getting you're getting reduction on Fire Breath.
It depends. Like, so you have 5 points left. You can go like, let's see. You can grab all of them actually. Yeah, you can go double Tyranny, double Burnout, and Everburning Flame, right?
Yeah. So I want to talk about Everburning. How do you guys feel about Everburning Flame?
It's weird. Like it can be good in like sustained AoE, but I feel like 9 times out of 10 you're probably not gonna get full value out of it. It gives you like a Fire Breath extension basically to your next Fire Breath without any kind of like Feed the Flames CDR mixed in. If you're like casting Living Flames and Pyres and stuff, it feels underwhelming to me though. I'm not sure what
take Feed the Flames though, like assuming it
works.
For sure. Because of Power Swell, you just have to take that. And
Yeah,
so I don't think an extension, especially as a capstone on that dot, matters literally at all.
I would like to see this reworked. It definitely is extremely underwhelming capstone with Feed the Flames existing. If you're already going down this side of the tree anyway. Tyranny is fucking great. I love the fact that it's in the middle of these two as well, because both builds can realistically use it. And also just as a straight up thing in Mythic Plus right now, if you wanted to in like an AoE situation, or you could tech out of Everburning Flame, assuming it isn't reworked, and you could also just grab Eternity Surge as well. Wouldn't be able to grab the capstone with it, but like you could move around a few points and mess around with that. But let's just assume for now that this is reworked. This is like a full fire build. This is you basically never disintegrating, correct? And you just slam. And this build is very mobile in Mythic Plus, especially like just the ability to just slam pyres. Like the fact that you don't have to channel disintegrate even outside of hover. Like you are just constantly moving. It plays and flows really well. I think the only thing that feels kind of bad about this is the cast of Firestorm when it's not procced. That kind of feels like it's a little slow. What do you guys think? Have you guys played the full fire build in Dungeons at all?
Yeah, so I just want to talk about something really quick. So Snapfire, that buff is extremely easy to munch unless you cast Living Flame into another spell every time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of frustrating whenever they add these kind of buffs that don't stack twice, and you have like a cast that you spam to proc it, because almost every single time you're going to proc it, you're going to cast another Living Flame before
Wait, when you
use
cast
it,
a
right?
Living Flame again after... Oh, you mean it's really likely to munch because you're not going to cancel your Living Flame? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so if you're casting 2 Living Flames in a row, right, you get done with the first cast, you go up the second one, it's like halfway through, and then it procs, right? So at that point, if you were to proc a second one, it would munch in that situation. So pretty much it forces you to like play this style where you Living Flame into Pyre, Living Flame into Firestorm, Living Flame into just any other spell. You're always alternating so that you can always get the effectiveness on that buff. And it really, really feels good if you like do a Living Flame into Firestorm, and it procs because you just like unleash like a Giga Firestorm. But I don't like the design of this because, you know, once again, if you're having like a spell that you're spamming, I think it should stack at least twice, because almost every player using this, unless they like are aware of this, is gonna munch procs like crazy.
Sure. And this is also something that I think is a little bit of point of criticism for the class. That I really like the way that even in a blue build, you're using Living Flame on single target, but then you're also using Azure Strike to prop up your Charge Blast. And I think it's always a consideration to Azure Strike in your Dragon Rage to get more procs. And I like the fact that you have 2 spenders, and depending on your build, you might actually use both of them in a different scenario. I think that's like really, really cool instead of just having it have to be binary. I think that's like one of the coolest parts of the spec, and I hope they lean into that. I think it's like for example, in this build, I actually really like playstyles way more where you don't Living Flame during Dragon Rage. I would actually like just prefer it for during Dragon Rage. Not only is it a really strong cooldown, but it's also mostly fully mobile, meaning that it's like always worth it to Azure Strike because your spenders are so much better than they are. With currently Living Flame as strong as it is, you're just going to Living Flame anyway, and you get less procs, so it doesn't feel as good, and then you're also less mobile. That doesn't seem quite right.
You can use like an Azure Strike to bank a couple Essence Burst procs coming out of like Dragon Rage too, but the 2 cast styles feel very different. Like it feels bad casting Living Flames during Dragon's Rage. At least to me it does. When
Really
you just be
bad.
spamming
No,
Azure
absolutely.
Strike.
Yes.
Yeah, but that being said though, like especially if you're taking Engulfing Blaze and you're playing like what we were talking about, where you flame breath, into a bunch of like living flame spam with burnout, that seems to be kind of like the engine for this build's like single target, right? But yeah, it's weird because you're like ignoring your essence, you're ignoring your clear casting, you're just like letting it rip with as many living flame classes as you can.
Okay. So now looking at this as just like a pure red, before we move to like a pure blue or like a more single targety based build, with some of the like capstone on the right and Charge Blast, how would you guys modify this if you wanted to incorporate spells like Eternity Surge or adding a lower cooldown kick when necessary? Probably in some... That's one thing I found weird about this tree, is that you definitely kind of don't want to take your lower cooldown kick ever. And I think they might want to make it a little easier to get as a DPS. So something to think about. What would you guys do to... like, do you guys think it would ever be worth in this build to grab anything over here that you don't currently have?
I think Eternity Surge is insane, and I'd like to grab it in any situation where I can. That ability, like, I feel like even just casting it like at level 1 seems to do like pretty good boss damage. But in any situation where there's like ads that are going to come out, which is pretty much like every raid encounter that isn't just strictly single target, Eternity Surge is basically like a way to just like instantly clap any ads that come out. The damage is just insane.
Yeah, it's super good target swapping ability, that's for sure.
And you don't even have to target swap. That's the best part. You just hit the boss with it and it just beats all the ads.
Yeah, I mean, like when a new mob spawns and it needs to die, it's just like always ready. You can even like pre-charge it. But you can't really grab the choice node with it here. Like, what are the options here, even in a fire build? Or is there really in a fire build the option to grab the button for Eternity Surge, or do you just take it natty?
I mean, I think it depends on the fire build. Like, if you shift out of like Firestorm, Snapfire, you can grab it.
Which that's what I was going to say too.
It's like probably the play at this point because of how bad they are. But if you're assuming fire is good, then I mean it's a weird like
you probably spec out of those two and grab the increased Eternity Surge and the node, right?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of could like just leave those if you like got rid of Everburning Flame and Burnout. You could grab both Azure Affinity and Eternity Surge, but then you're like in some weird like I have like one N tier like capstone kind of talent, and it seems almost a bit too hybrid to me. If that makes sense.
The cascading power talent that's directly below like the choice for Engulfing Blaze and the other one, I think that one's bad. I don't think that's it's the one that looks like a circle with like red and blue. 10% on the left.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. That one seems bad to me, and I don't like it, and I don't think I'd take it in pretty much any situation.
Yeah, it could be good on AoE, but I also don't value the cooldown reduction on Eternity Surge very highly. I think, yeah, especially because of how strong Living Flame is. But I just don't think that like you're casting enough essence abilities unless you're in Dragon Rage to really
definitely. And then also because it works on any crits, right? So if you're hitting 8 targets with this, for example, you could go into it and just immediately get 2 procs always from Continuum, or very likely. Okay, that's something to think about. Let's do a blue build now. Full blue with just like the other things. Who wants to do this one? I guess Kalamazi did the fire, but obviously everyone can contribute to it. This is
I'll walk us through the blue build if you want. So yeah, I mean, like we were saying before, it seems like a lot of red stuff is like pretty good, but maybe not quite there. The blue build though, it kind of, I mean, we're overlapping a lot, right? So let's just start with the like just going down the tree here. Obviously, you're going to want both of the clear casts at the top, right? And then Disintegrate's going to be a big source of damage, so you're definitely going to want to pick that one up as well. And then, let me just look at your screen here. Oh yeah, we definitely want Essence Attunement. I think that's one you pretty much always take. At this point, we kind of have a choice. I think Deep Breath is a pretty good option here.
I think Deep Breath is the play unless it's like you're mostly blue for single target. But then there's just like this moment where a bunch of ads spawned where like throwing those 2 points into volatility could be like just dumping a full thing into it, or dense energy could be a consideration. But I think then like if you're thinking like, I mean, I guess the idea right here is just to think pure single, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so moving on from there, we should unlock the next row. Yeah. So obviously we take Dragon Rage. That's essential talent. We're going to immediately spec into Power Swell, because that one is just that one also seems like a staple to me. Same with Power Nexus, the one below it. And then obviously we're going to want to get Azure Affinity because that's blue damage. That's what we're focusing on. Eternity Surge for sure. That ability just pipes. And then definitely Charge Blast as well. I think Charge Blast is really, really good.
What do you think about the node under Eternity Surge?
So I think at the start of the expansion, Causality is going to be the one to go with, because it, we'll probably have like less crit at the start. But I think as we get more gear, there's definitely going to be like a point where you're going to want to swap it maybe. Basically the argument for Causality in all cases is that more cooldown reduction on Eternity Surge means more uptime on Power Swell, and more uptime on Power Swell means more Disintegrate, right? So I feel like that is probably a lock-in, but obviously if you had a lot of crit, it could change.
Okay, so now we have Charge Blast, Causality, and Power Nexus. We need 3 more points to unlock the bottom part of the tree.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to get Imminent Destruction. That's got heavy synergy with Power Spell and all the others we were talking about. The same with Font of Magic. Font of Magic is a lock-in as well.
Okay.
And then for our last trait, I think Blue actually has the freedom to spec into the Imposing Presence, the Quell cooldown.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything else above it is like maybe if you wanted a little bit more AoE focus. You could also get like the Pyre one, but yeah, I would probably go with the Quell. And then from that point on, we're definitely want something below Charge Blast. For Cleave, you're going to want Expansive Maw. And then I don't really like how it plays, but the other one seems like it'd probably be better in single target.
I mean, certainly. But I guess Charge Blast just does 10% more damage. It feels bad if it procs 2 times in a row. That's for sure.
It feels really bad.
Yeah, it feels like turbo
what am I
bad.
supposed to do with this?
Yeah, but it feels really good when it procs once. I would agree that... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say there's another reason though, and we'll get to it like once we get a little down the tree. But I think it's just I think that there's like a design problem with how they kind of built this.
What do you mean it feels bad when it procs twice? Are you talking like you can't disintegrate double Azure Strike again?
No, it's that you lose the buff from Azure Striking twice for the increased damage of Charge Blast. You Azure Strike, Charge Blast, and then if you get a proc, you can Charge Blast again, which is good. But then by the time you get off GCD again, even if you have enough orbs to use it, you lose the thing from Azure Strike, and then you have to press that button again to prop it up. It feels weird. And it's anti-synergistic with scintillation too.
Yeah. So have we unlocked the next row yet?
We have unlocked.
Yeah, we're still good. Yeah. So Azure Strike, obviously 2 points into that bad boy because we're gonna want to split up. I think if you're gonna do any sort of cleave, like even 2-target cleave, you'd probably take the one on the right, Eternity Span.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was gonna say, isn't it? So how much are you actually Azure Striking as a blue build? Are you living flaming permanently outside of or inside of Dragon Rage? Like, do you Azure Strike just to buff your Charge Blast and that's it?
So in my testing, it seems like Azure Strike right now for blue build, like if you're going the blue build I've been testing with, it seems like it was about DPS neutral to just like never cast Living Flame and just like only Azure Strike.
Damn. Okay. That seems weird, but I mean, I would actually like it to be where you Living Flame outside of Dragon Rage and you Living Flame outside of buffing up your Charge Blast, and then you Azure Strike during your cooldown to make it full mobile, and you obviously do it for the Charge Blast integration. I think that's fun. But I think ignoring Living Flame entirely on the blue build is kind of lame. I like the idea that you bounce between the two spenders or the generators.
Yeah, and then next is Focusing Iris, and this is the part I was going to talk about that kind of ties into why I think that trait for Charge Blast is bad, because as this build with Focusing Iris, you can pretty much always have 10% damage up on the target for every big damage event, and if you get done with the Disintegrate and then you Azure Strike twice into a Charge Blast and it procs, that second one's not going to get it unless you have like Extreme Haste. So that's another reason why I think that talent kind of is at odds with what seems to be the right gameplay.
Okay.
But anyways, moving on from there, Scintillation is just way too good for single target. You're definitely taking that no matter what. And then obviously you have some extra points here. So this is where we
Ruin's like you have to have Ruin. Right?
Yeah. I would say Ruin is definitely there. Tyranny also very, very strong. But I want to give some options because there are situations where maybe it's like 2-target cleave. And I think you would, in any situation where it's 2-target, you're going to pick Eternity Span because if you have Scintillation, it affects the Eternity Surge level 1 and it makes it hit 2 targets every time. So it's like a Giga Splitting Ice.
Are you sure that single talent would be worth more than just empowering it twice?
Like no, I'm saying the one that procs from Scintillation, the free one.
Oh, I see. I do see what you're saying. Okay, that is actually a very big deal. Okay, I see what you mean. That's actually really fucking sick.
Yeah, it's like Splitting Ice, but like completely cracked out. And whenever it procs, you just see like 60k damage go out. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, like when I was like doing like testing on dummies, like using Warcraft logs, like the variance between some pools when like you had like good Eternity Surge Scintillation RNG was like actually pretty wild. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But anyway, so like that one seems like a pretty heavy contender for me. But if you're going like pure single target, I guess you'd probably stick with Ruin, max out Tyranny.
Well, you can do all of that, right? So you can Ruin, max out Tyranny, and grab Eternity Span.
Yes, you can. There was something else I wanted though. Oh, do we have to drop the interrupt for that?
No,
nope. Or are we still good with that?
No. Nope.
You can grab. There should be 1 point left. You can grab like Dense Magic maybe, like at the top possibly.
Yeah, let's scroll up. Can you scroll below on your screen, Max?
Yeah, I'll take the points out of Tyranny and Ruin.
I think this is good. I'm pretty sure this is the sauce. Yeah, back to Ruin and Tyranny, I think.
Then you can just take that every single time. And then in a pure single target scenario, you could 1 point into Heat Wave, I guess.
Yeah, I think I just remembered why. So it's on my character. I can't take it. That's what I was misremembering.
Yeah,
but Max level, you'll be able to take it. Yeah. Yeah, so this build is fantastic. You've got like so many little short cooldowns that do a lot of damage, and you've pretty much got every ability that synergizes with fully empowering. I don't know if you always fully empower, but I think the rule is just from like playing it feels like if you're gonna not cap on essence, you probably fully charge every time. And that feels really weird for Eternity Surge, but at least you have like the Tip the Scales talent, so you can kind of keep that in your hand for whenever cooldowns are coming up, because if you're in Dragon Rage and you're fully charging like an Eternity Span, that's going to feel really bad. You're going to feel stupid for doing that, unless it's like big AoE, you know?
Yeah.
So I just think Eternity Surge should change. Like I don't know. Like I actually really think it's cool that like Scintillation with Eternity Span like does that 2-target cleave thing. But I think Eternity Surge in general just being so I think the reason they did this is like if you look at the preservation tree, for example, like something that makes sense for healing is like a way to charge this up is it heals extra allies, right? But like I feel like that doesn't really translate well to DPS. Like having to hold something longer to make it AoE, it absolutely does not feel good. And the fact that you're saying that you would actually empower this to 4 even in single target, that is fucking stupid. Like that is bad. That would feel horrific. But I think
and just
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just to expand on that though, I'm not sure of that. That just it feels that way, but assuming that you're not going to cap your essence, and obviously not in cooldowns or anything like that.
I just think this brings us to a much broader topic of just empowering in general. I feel like it's flawed, and it doesn't play the way it should. It's this new thing in the game that does not feel awesome at all. It feels slow, not being able to like. I don't think it needs all of these things, but it absolutely needs a few of can cast during hover, is shorter, does scale with haste, and then in general, I think that they can be way more interesting than this.
Yeah, the biggest gripe for me is that hover doesn't let you empower. I feel like hover should, and that would fix a lot of what I don't like about it. I also don't like that like if you press the button and then you let it up, for some reason, even though it shows on the UI you can use it again, you have to wait like almost like a global cooldown in order to like use it again. So it's like this huge punishment if you're just like everyone who plays WoW probably is used to like spamming the cooldown as it's about to come up, right? Like you kind of build that muscle memory. And empowering kind of goes exactly opposite of that, right? Because if you do that, you're just going to waste the global basically every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. And I think that with their, like anytime you have talents where it's like based on empowerment level or makes you empower more, like you're just heavily incentivizing just full sending everything, right? And that's just like, what's the point then of having empowered abilities if you're just full sending them? So it seems like an easy fix would be just to make Power Swell a baseline duration and not have it be based off empowerment level, and that would like heavily move away some of the incentivization. And then maybe Tyranny is like the one where you just full send, and that's a capstone, so it's fine, right? It's fine. The capstone affects your gameplay that way.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that. What do you? So this is like kind of more broad about the class. Unless Trill or Goop, do you guys have any hybrid builds you guys think are cool and want to build and you think could be powerful that are different from the generic full red or full blue?
Not personally. I mean, I think there's more room to like experiment with that when all the talents are working correctly. I think there could be something there with a hybrid build with the flame breath cooldown. Because I really like these points in blue on the right, specifically. What's this ability? Charge Blast. Not so much on single target, but like as you add a couple more targets, I think blue feels insane. But it's also like really, it's kind of BM Hunter spammy. Like the only time you ever have to stop is to channel one of these empowered abilities, and otherwise you're just actually instant cast everything, spitting on the move.
Yeah, outside of empowers,
don't have a care in the world.
Yeah, outside of empowers, it's actually insane how mobile they are. As blue, you just don't do shit.
I have a feeling that it was made that way because of the 25-yard range. Like that's going to be a big limiting factor
Definitely.
In how you play. So like having that freedom of movement's really good.
I get so in the log that you brought up earlier, I was actually kind of playing like a hybrid build. Like I went.
You want to build that? Here.
I went fire down to engulfing blaze, which is the living flame damage increase and also cast time increase.
Okay.
And I also went pretty deep into blue as well. I went all the way down to scintillation at the very bottom.
Oh really? Okay.
Yep. So I would take that, and then
On the left, Font of Magic, Heat Wave, Burnout. I did try playing Everburning Flame, but I don't think I cast enough Living Flames for that to really matter. Since I only casted Living Flame like for like mostly the first 8 seconds after Fire Breath. So I think taking that point out and putting it in Ruin instead is probably better.
Okay.
But since I was only empowering Eternity Surge once on single target, I don't think Tyranny was that great. And
Oh, this is interesting. Okay, I'm trying to. Where am I missing points here? Is this correct on the? Well, this is single target, so it wouldn't be volatility. It would be like.
Oh, I picked volatility anyway because there's unless you. I don't think like do you even press like deep breath on one target like.
I don't think you do, honestly. Like, it's close. It seems pretty bad in single target, but I could be wrong.
I'm pretty sure you do, especially with Tyranny, especially if you have Focusing Iris, because if you like prime it with the 10%, I don't know. Whenever I was looking at it, like the damage per execute time, obviously, like it depends on how far you go, right? Because if you go further, it takes longer. But
Yeah.
I think if you like shorten the range on it. Oh, speaking of, it's really weird that there's like a minimum range. I feel like, especially since you have only 25 yards, you're like in this small window where like the only spot where you can like deep breath and also damage the mobs is like it just feels ridiculous to try and find that sweet spot all the time.
I think it's worth bringing up and highlighting. Like, there should be like, I get like the minimum range is probably like what, like 7 yards or something now. There's been plenty of times where I want to deep breath, I kind of target right in front of me, but I just can't. Like, there's an object behind it. Pathing's an issue in the first place with like like at cursor macros with it, but it feels like the minimum range should be a lot less. Whether it's a limitation with like how the spell's designed or something, but there's been plenty of times I want to, but I just can't. It's really awkward.
Trill, where did you
stop? I stopped at Eternity Surge. I did not go into Charge Blast.
Oh, interesting.
And I went on the back on the left. I went Font of Magic, Heat Wave, Burnout. But also on the right, I went into Power Nexus, Eternity's Span, Focusing Iris, Scintillation.
Yeah. So this
since I wasn't casting Azure Strike, so I didn't take that one at all.
How did you get down to? Did you grab Eternity Span?
I got Eternity Span.
Just for less points? Oh yeah. Okay, and then you grab the extra point in Burnout. So this is just like you doing, like after your Fire Breath, you're just a machine gun living flamer.
You just spam Living Flame till the buff runs out, and then I would one empower Eternity Surge, and then just disintegrate until I'm out of essence, and I would just continue to spam Living Flame until I had more essence to disintegrate again.
And that was the log that you linked, which is this. Just 1 point Eternity Surging, and then it's just 4 spells.
Yeah.
It just looks crazy.
So I want to say something about this hybrid build. I think it's really overpowered that you can both have Scintillation and the other talents that buff up Disintegration while also having Burnout. Burnout seems to be kind of the driver for single target red damage, and obviously Disintegration is a big part of the single target on the blue side. Having both of those feels really good, and it almost feels like you want to like wait on your Fire Breath until you basically like have nothing else going on, and it just gives you like another cooldown to
it feels like demonic in a way, Demon Hunter, where like you Fire Breath, and then normally where it would be kind of boring, it's like, oh, you're in meta for 6 seconds. Oh, you can just spam the fuck out of Fire Breath, and you have a decent amount of cooldowns coming out or damage coming out.
I think you can easily move a point out of Burnout into like Feed the Flames for AoE as well. If you need to spam Pyre and Fire Breath, like, because I think it's still like a really strong.
Yeah, that's the only real issue I have with this build is the fact that you have the Pyre Essence cost reduction on a spell where you're literally never casting Pyre instead of except for when ads come out. Or
well, you would press it on AoE just in pure single target like so you wouldn't.
And with that build, you weren't even like Azure Striking before your Charge Blast. It was just like
I didn't play Charge Blast.
He didn't play Charge Blast. Yeah.
Oh right, okay.
It didn't even feel worth pressing, to be honest.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah, I think Charge Blast, unless you're picking up the Cleave talent on it, to me, I feel like you want it in Cleave, and that's pretty much it.
How often do you not have some kind of Cleave to do?
Exactly. Yeah. It feels like you always have some.
I feel like you could play this Living Flame build on like a Skolex type boss, but then most other bosses in the game, you're gonna want to go into Charge Blast, and then Azure Strike damage and Expansive Maw.
Dude, I think
all that stuff.
like blue. I really like both builds. I think like blue build being so mobile and being able to mobile in the way that you're like Azure striking a lot, and the fact that you can get like multiple target cleave with Charge Blast. Like, dude, on 3 target cleave, Charge Blast is going to crank, like actually do so much damage. And then Fire build gets its mobility in a different way from piring, right? You can just kind of like run around and pyre. I think they both feel distinctly different, and they're both good.
Yeah. They're almost like opposites, because whenever you're building with blue, or like building quote unquote, you're really mobile, and then whenever you spin, you have to kind of stand still or hover. But with red, it's literally the opposite, right? Like while you're just cranking living flames, you're staying still, and otherwise you're just running around lobbing meatballs.
What do you guys think are so obviously very positive about the talent tree? What are some nodes that seem maybe in a weird spot, or are decisions you really don't want to make?
So I think that Ever Burning Flame is just weird, but I do think that it might feel good to take in like some sort of weird hybrid AoE situations where you're wanting to keep like your dot up on a bunch of enemies. But I think that one's, it feels out of the way just because burnout's 2 points, right? Also, like the Honed Aggression, I always want to take Honed Aggression, but it feels a little tight there with that as well. The start of this tree is just weird, right? I think we kind of already talked about this, but like having to essentially put that point into Pyre, it just that feels weird for a lot of situations where you wouldn't really use it that much. And then like everything on the far right side with like Firestorm and Snapfire, I don't know. I feel like you have to go like so deep into there. I wish Firestorm was a little bit higher up.
Yeah, that was something I was thinking of too, where I feel like having to hard commit into Firestorm and Charge Blast, I think they didn't want you to have that many buttons. Like, I don't think they ever want you to play both Firestorm and Charge Blast by the way they put them at the tree. I definitely think Honed Aggression being down here feels off. Because it's like, Eternity Surge is twice as many target, powerful. Fire Breath damage over time, especially combined with this, very powerful. Feed the Flames, very powerful. And then it's just like Azure Strike damage, which is supposed to be like deep in the blue tree. I think this node is supposed to exist for the sole reason of you press Azure Strike instead of Living Flame on single target. I think that's kind of the point of this, and why it's in like the blue side of the tree, or what its intention is. I don't know if it necessarily does that, but like that's kind of what the point is. So it would need to be kind of more deeply ingrained in the blue side.
So for blue AoE, like a lot of your damage, in fact, I think your #1 DPS is Azure Strike. And basically that talent, like if you're doing any form of AoE, it's just, if you don't have it, you're just lost. But the expanding on that though, like for blue, you basically get all your AoE for free while doing single target, which is pretty sick. Like, and I like that a lot. It feels like you're just this boss free cleave master, kind of like how Mage used to be. And that's sick. And red honestly kind of has the same thing going on, right? Like especially if you're using Pyre. So it just feels really good with the cleave.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
It does. It just feels like if you're committing to like Firestorm, Snapfire, like if they're tuned properly, it's just like I don't feel like they compare equally to like Charge Blast and going into like either Arcane Reverb or Expansive Maw, right? Because like you can make a case for both Arcane Reverb and Maw being like sort of single target esque, but they definitely offer more of a single target value compared to like Firestorm and Snapfire. Like unless they just buff the shit out of Firestorm and Snapfire, right? Mm-hmm. It's just sort of odd. But yeah, blue has like just that. Like, if you're fully spec'd into it, your Azure Strike hits 6 mobs. Your Eternity Surge hits 8 mobs. You can just pyre things if you want, and your something else cleaves too. Fire Breath cleaves. The whole spec just cleaves, right? While also doing good prio damage. But if you're going into, like, Firestorm, Snapfire stuff, it's a bit awkward for Fire, at least I feel like. It's still solid and it's fun to play, but I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect there if they're trying to go along that line of, like, you can have either Firestorm or Charge Blast, but not both. And he brought up, like, the Ever-Burning Flame thing as well. It is a bit odd having both Ever-Burning Flame and like Feed the Flames, because like you said, the duration extension is nice, but I think chances are pretty high you're grabbing Feed the Flames, and then if you're grabbing Ever-Burning, it's almost a bit like redundant.
No, it's definitely
redundant.
What I mean? It's definitely absolutely redundant. Like, I actually think the biggest problem on the tree is the kick.
Oh yeah, it's so hard to get the kick, especially as red.
So the only reason that they put this in this tree at all is because they want to get Quell in the class tree, and they don't want the healer to have a 20-second cooldown. They're like, okay, Healer having 40-second cooldown, all good. That's fine. But like DPS has a 20. But they put the 20 like in the middle of, they definitely intentionally put it in the middle of both, so it was easily able to be grabbed by both builds. But you have to like make the choice to have like a DPS, you know, it's obviously, I think this cooldown's length of 20 seconds for a DPS invoker is intentionally in between a average ranged cooldown of kick and a melee cooldown of kick, because it's like a mid-range class. Like that's kind of the point. I think they did that with their interrupt cooldown as well. I would rather see this be baseline. I just think if you are a DPS evoker, your cooldown should be a 20-second kick, just straight up. I can even say that over here in the class tree. And I would like to see a much more interesting node tying together the red and blue in the middle, because right now I think this class, even though both builds play pretty well, I think it is a little bit one-dimensional, and I think they could add a really, really cool thing here to especially allow you to like very much easily or much more easily cross into the other side of the tree's capstone nodes based on their power level, where right now you have to like grab a no damage ability to like do that, or you have to grab Azure Strike, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't really feel good. So I would definitely like to see this moved, able to be got for free, right? Like, I mean, something you could do for sure is just make Pyre baseline, which also gives healer evokers a you know, a damaging ability for AoE, right? And then you can just put this in that spot, right? And then Pyre's baseline, that's here. And then it kind of solves that, and then you can put something more interesting there.
Yeah, I'm surprised there aren't any talents that like make it so that if you spin like a red spinner, it affects a blue spinner in some way, or like vice versa.
That needs
it seems
to
like
exist.
that would be like a no-brainer for like a middle talent, like imposing presence. So
literally, you could have a 1-point talent in the middle of the tree that just makes your spec instead of red or blue purple. And by using red spells, you are empowering blue spells, and it's all about the weaving between the two. I think that would be
really cool.
That
actually.
would be fucking awesome, and it's like this class is begging for it.
yeah, it seems like a missed opportunity a little bit. There's another hybrid build that's very similar to kind of what you're looking at right now. But essentially the difference is that you would pick Everburning Flame for like AoE, and it's doing like a lot of AoE damage. There's in like in that build, right? Like you'd be casting the red spells, you'd be casting the blue spells, you're pyring, you're using like Charge Blast as a blue spinner. I feel like it would be right at home with that kind of playstyle.
I can see that, yeah.
All right, cool. So this is I think we're at a good spot. I just want to know if you guys have any final takes about Evoker as they stand currently with DPS Evoker specifically, like where potentially they'll be in the meta, what they'll be good at or better at compared to other classes. Do they do something that like no other class currently does? We've already talked a bit about like empowering and stuff. Just kind of general thoughts.
I'm a little concerned about the 25-yard range thing in a raid, because like, is this class gonna fully be able to get targeted by ranged mechanics, but then you just can't ever be with the ranged camp? I feel like it's gonna be really difficult if that's the case to like on bosses where ranged have to bait stuff. Like, how do you bring this class?
So there's like two different ways it could go, right? Like they could code it so that you're basically like a Mistweaver or like a Holy Paladin.
That would be so
you
fucking
basically are
broken.
like counted as a melee. Yeah, so that seems really probably not going to happen because it seems too good.
Well,
but
it's
yeah, I
broken
mean,
either
like
way.
imagine
It's either broken in a good way where they can't get
Or-
targeted,
I
or in a
think-
bad way where
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't bring them because they literally will fuck over the entire raid.
Yeah,
I
imagine
think-
you're like doing Jailer, and it's like, how can you ever be with any of the range? You know, like you're gonna be in melee pretty much.
Yeah, you wouldn't be considered for a ranged job like that. It wouldn't be able to flex to that role most likely. But also, I think that the reason that this class's mobility is so fucking unbelievable is because of that. Like the reason that hover exists is because you guys are not a 40-yard range class. But I think I do agree that is going to feel bad. Like just imagine you have like a melee camp and a rage camp, and the range have to like bait sleep puddles away on Lords of Dread, and then like you have to like hover out of range of the boss and then come back real quick just to bait correctly. Like it's definitely like the way that raid encounters work. It's definitely going to be very weird, and the alternative of just making them a melee healer or a melee for selection of certain spells is definitely a situation where there's no way they would have this much movement if they didn't have to ever do any mechanics, right? So They are definitely in kind of a spot there.
I mean, even just like speaking as a mage with 40 yards, I'm always annoyed whenever the range stack is like all boomkin and hunters, and they're just out of range of the boss. And that happens all the time whenever you're raiding, and you're like, "Hey guys, can you scooch forward a bit?" And that's kind of the situation I feel like you'll just permanently be in as Evoker.
Oh, dude, someone in my chat just had a fucking crane brain idea. What if they made hover increase your range to 40 yards during its duration?
Well, I thought about that, but
that's good.
Isn't hover already too strong and like up too often?
Yeah, do that.
Yeah. Of course, it's super busted, but I mean, you wouldn't have 100% uptime of being at 40 yards. But exactly the scenario we were just talking about gets solved by having that exactly.
Yeah,
right?
and you're definitely taking.
And you would have to make sure to hover back within range by the time it was over. I actually really like that idea.
You can make the second charge talent just a 40-yard talent instead for hover. Yeah.
Very true. And then like what someone said in chat about just give them 40-yard range. What's the problem? I'm pretty sure if they did, they would have to nerf their mobility a bit. But that's okay.
Also, they can't just use mostly instant cast. I mean, unless they want to be like a BM hunter, but
they also have like complete insta cast ability. Like BM Hunter is definitely a relic, and it's also a spec of a triple DPS class. It's not an entire class's DPS identity. That would kind of be an issue.
For stuff that you have to snap bait, it's actually probably not too bad because you have rescue, and then you have hover. Like you can talent into Tailwind, the move speed on hover for the first 4 seconds. Worst case scenario, you can just like you can rescue out to the range camp, and then you can just use Fly By Me and fuck some guy over so you can get back into range.
Something you can do with Fly By Me as well. If you can like target certain guardians in the raid, so like totems or bloodworms or someone's like wild spirits, or not wild spirits, like their like other pet or something, and you can cast Fly By Me with them as the target. It won't pick them up, and then Fly By Me functionally just acts like a heroic leap. So
that'll be
also
next week.
Also, if you're within 30 yards of a melee, you can also just like cast it on them, and it won't really do anything to them, and you just fly directly to them.
True, they'll probably be mad, but
yeah, they will.
But yeah, you could do that for sure. Like even like as a scenario where like you're doing this baiting thing, Fly With Me also just solves that problem as well. Like just imagine you're on Lords of Dread. The ranged are in the back left corner baiting asleep, and right after that is the swarm after the sleep gets baited. And you are in the middle of melee and ranged. You just Fly By Me to a ranged right as the bait is going out. So you are properly baiting at the edge of the room, and then you fly you and that ranged into melee to like get ready for the swarm, right? Like there's you do have just an absolutely absurd amount of movement abilities for this exact reason. I definitely think we're gonna have to have raid testing and a lot of dungeons to kind of really get in. Like you're gonna have to get in and actually play it to really feel how bad or not bad it is.
Yeah, I think it's also gonna heavily depend on like obviously the boss design, because there could just be half of the bosses where it's not even really an issue. It's probably just gonna be like 1 or 2 bosses every tier that feel really bad.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. I think we're good. I think the class definitely has a ton of potential. I think like the worst case scenario is that it's sometimes the specs don't like there's not like a ton of like micromanaging or a lot of interaction with the spec. Like I think especially fire is like turbo brain dead, but I mean that's fine that like one of your specs is brain dead. That is my biggest bit though. I definitely think Quell should be passive, and I think some kind of purple build could be really fun and like just a really good idea. Okay, so thank you guys for coming on. That was excellent. We'll probably do the same thing with other classes where if they make any major changes, we'll probably have like 30 to 45 minute very focused discussions on exactly that, but nothing this long again in the future. So I'll leave the Discord group open.
Yeah, cool. I appreciate the invite. We got the Warlock trees coming up next week too, right?
I think the Warlock trees are a bit away.
We're a way away, but
yeah, I think Mage is definitely going to come before the Warlock since they leaked most of it.
Yeah, so what I know of the classes that are currently waiting on coming out is like I know the guy who made the rogue trees, which are like have been done and are also very well made, he's also making the Demon Hunter tree currently. So that means that his job was probably do rogue tree and then do Demon Hunter tree. It was not do them both at the same time. So some specs that have very little stuff on them right now might be because literally no one has started working on them until recently. So the I think some of them might come out like 3 or 4 weeks from now. I think my guess is that we're going to get 1 to 2 classes per week for the next 3 to 4 weeks, and then they'll all be out. And I'm to be honest, I actually think that's really good. Like even if they had the chance to release a bunch of them that were mostly finished on Tuesday, I feel like feedback would be much harder to give them. I feel like when it's like 1 to 2 classes a week, it's much easier to like really focus on those and get the feedback across than it would be if it was like kind of overwhelming with a lot of information at once. So
For sure. I think staggering now is the best way to do it for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. All right. Thanks for talking, guys.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, it was a good talk.
I'm out of here. Yep.
See you
Have a
guys
good
later.
one.
Yep. Bye-bye.
See ya.